Chapter 1268. I'm going to boil some hot water. You go to the bed and lie down for a while. The room on the left is the bedroom, Baizhuan said as he patted Aju's head again. Aju knew that he wanted her to be obedient. Anyway, she had always been obedient. Without the gravity cuff on her wrist, she would not move around casually. However, wasn't it not good to go to the bedroom as soon as she came? Aju still wanted to say something, but Baizhuan had already gone into the kitchen and started to light the fire. She was still wearing his military uniform and there was a faint smell which was slightly fragrant. It did not smell very refreshing, but it faintly revealed a pleasant and refreshing feeling, which made people particularly calm and tranquil. Forget it, if the little brother wanted her to go, she would go. Lying on the bed was more comfortable. As Aju thought about it, she pushed open the bedroom door with the white cat on her head. Other than some men's products like cigarette boxes, there was also a very big Alaskan Malamute which was glaring at the person who came. Woof woof woof. Why did Master bring a woman back? This doesn't make sense. She must have bad intentions towards Master. Let's see how it will scare her away. Helpless, before Alaskan Malamute could use its deterrence, Aju recognized it at a glance and directly pounced on it. Little Allah, I didn't expect you to become so big. The originally majestic Alaskan Malamute's neck was about to be broken. What little Allah? He was so mighty and strong. Was the reputation of the country's first army dog for nothing? Wait a minute, why did this scene look so familiar? And this woman's strength? Woof woof woof. Alaskan Malamute seemed to have suddenly thought of something and barked even more loudly. Master, save me. Hey, you're bullying Aju again. Baizhuan appeared by the door with a tall and straight figure. He held a cup of hot tea in his hand and spoke in disapproval. Alaskan Malamute. Master, who is bullying who? Can't you see that I'm about to die? Aju was still stroking the dog's head with all her might. Alaskan Malamute was already lying there exhausted and began to stick out its tongue. Baizhuan saw that Aju was almost done playing, so he walked over and handed the hot tea to her. There's longan in it. Take a small sip when you drink it. The water is still hot. Yes. Aju nodded and took it. Her other hand was pulled over by Baizhuan and she sat on the side of the bed. Her stomach warmed up in a second. She lowered her head and saw that her little brother had given her a warm water bottle. Baizhuan turned his face to the side and naturally placed his palm on the hot water bag. When he saw that Aju was looking at him, he smiled and turned to kiss the child's eyes. Aju was stunned again. She felt that this time her little brother seemed to like kissing her a lot. In the past she could still kiss him back, but now, she could only feel her heart beating faster and faster, her face heating up and the corners of her eyes turning red. There was a shyness in her eyes that she did not even realize. Seeing her like this, Baizhuan's eyes darkened. He kissed her again with that strength, but this time the position of his thin lips changed, landing behind her reddened ear. Aju trembled as well. An indescribable feeling spread from her tailbone to her entire body. In the past, when her little brother kissed her, his forehead, eyes and mouth seemed to be greeting her. But he had never kissed her like this before. Aju widened her eyes at a loss. What greeted her was a pleasant smell and his hot breath by her ear. Aju. Then he laughed in a low and deep voice. As expected, it's better for others not to be around. Aju's mind was already a little muddled. When she was hugged by him like when she was young, she realized how much she missed such an embrace. At that time her little brother was sitting on the sofa reading a book while she was sitting on his lap and eating. He was clearly such a clean person, but he never talked about her eating. Was it only when they were separated once that she would occasionally think of the scenes that she had neglected? Aju lowered her head and held Baizhuan's hand. Baizhuan paused for a moment and kissed the top of her head with a smile. Sleep with me for a while? Aju nodded first, then raised her eyes and asked seriously, is there enough time? Little brother still has to go for our military training at 7:30. There's still time. Baizhuan hugged her and turned sideways, letting her look at the watch on her wrist. It's 6:05. You can sleep for at least an hour. If that was the case, there was nothing to worry about. However, for some reason her heart still felt like it was trembling, especially when her nose was filled with the smell of her little brother. Her entire body seemed to be soft. In order to prevent Baizhuan from seeing through her abnormality, Aju simply closed her eyes. It would not be so abnormal if she fell asleep. Baizhuan looked at her fair little face. First he used his fingertips to wipe the dirt on Aju's face. Then he covered the hot water bag for her with one hand and hugged her with the other to lean against the headboard of the bed. To him Aju was still too young. She was 16 years old, but in reality she was only 15.5 years old. He did not want to scare her. Even though there was a part of her body that was already very uncomfortable, her breathing was still a little heavy. After the person in his arms really fell asleep, Baizhuan touched her cheek. His Aju had returned to his side. This feeling was really good. The sun shone in from outside the window and everywhere was warm. Baizhuan had forgotten how long it had been since he had experienced such leisure. In fact, the person who could not leave the other party had always been him. It was not Aju. Alaska was locked outside the door, but it did not dare to scratch the door. It had an expression as if it had seen a ghost. Originally, in the past few years, the little Hercules had not appeared, so its mistress would be replaced. Now it seemed that its master had taken it in back then just to give the little Hercules a wrestling toy. Tricks full of tricks. Where was the sincerity? Woof. Alaska lay on the ground in despair. When it saw the white cat walking towards it, its back quivered and with a whoosh it crawled into the dog hole. Its tail was exposed and its big head trembled as it hugged it with its paws in shock. It refused to show its head again no matter what. The white cat walked past it and glanced at it. There was a hint of contempt in its eyes. This was the scene that Baizhuan saw when he came out. He only raised his eyebrows and did not say anything as he directly walked into the bathroom. His dog was so scared by a cat that it was trembling like a little chick. Alaska. Master, you are not moved by such a scene. Are you still human? The bathroom door opened again. It turned out that it was Baizhuan who had walked out to get a towel. In the future when you see Aju, don't come up and hug her. Alaska. You are even jealous of a dog. Master, you are simply immoral. Chapter 1269. On this side, Baizhuan was still educating his military dog. On the other side there were already people staring at him. Other than Vice Captain Zhang, there was also Lu Zitong. The rich young lady held a phone in her hand and said impolitely to the other side of the phone, "Let my father answer the phone." The secretary was a good secretary. He was very professional. Even though he was treated so impolitely, his expression did not turn ugly. He only turned his head and handed the phone to a man in a suit. "President Liu, it's a call from Mississippi." The man was still at the dining table. He was also a powerful person. When he heard that it was a call from his daughter, he immediately picked up the phone. "So what's wrong? Is it because you're not used to the food in school?" "It has nothing to do with the food." Lu Zitong's tone softened when she was in front of her father. "Dad, can you tell the school to change the instructor for our class?" The man was stunned. "Change the instructor? The instructor from the archaeology department is much better than our current instructor. He's also handsome." Lu Zitong lowered her voice as she spoke. "I want to gain popularity on Weibo now. Only when the instructor is good-looking can there be a topic." The man laughed again and didn't care at all. "I thought it was something serious. They are all the instructors of the same school, so it shouldn't matter which class they take. I'll talk to the school about this matter." "It's useless to talk to the school." Lu Zitong anxiously paced her feet. "Dad, the professor said that this is an internal decision of the instructors. Help me contact Uncle Li and ask him to give the order. I've asked around. These instructors are all from the army." His words are useful. The man was amused again. "You really have a lot of ideas. Alright, I'm eating with your Uncle Li now. The matter of the instructor is not difficult. We'll go over tomorrow afternoon. Who do you want to be your instructor? Just point it out when the time comes." "Okay." Hearing this answer, Lu Zitong's eyes lit up. After hanging up, her eyes narrowed and a cold smile appeared on her face. Her limelight was not something that anyone could snatch away just because they wanted to. Thinking of this, she called her agency again and told her agent to think of a topic first. When she bought the trending topic the day after tomorrow, she would be able to catch up with a wave of Weibo headlines. The weather outside gradually cooled down. When Aju woke up again, there was no one beside her. The warm water bag on her stomach was still warm. When she sat up, 2 strands of hair stood up on her head. Aju stretched out her hand and tried her best to press it down twice. She could not press it down, so she could only stand up first. She was still holding the hot water bag in her hand. She looked around the living room, but she did not find Baizhuan, so she followed the sound of water and entered the bathroom. As soon as he opened the door, he saw something he shouldn't have seen. Bai Juan seemed to have just taken a shower. His lower body was only wearing a pair of military pants with a black belt tied around it. His upper body was not wearing anything at all, revealing his alluring waistline and well-defined chest. His Apollo's belt could be seen clearly, and even the black mark on the side of his waist could be seen clearly. The toughness and sharpness of a soldier could be seen clearly. There was still water vapor on his body. His head was covered with a pure white towel, and his wet black hair made him look even more out of place in this secular world. His face was handsome. A Jew paused for a moment. It was as if there was a small drum hammer beating in her chest. She directly closed her eyes. Like a little monk, her small mouth kept moving. Only when he got closer did he realize that she was chanting Buddhist scriptures. Emptiness is form, form is emptiness, she muttered like a little hamster. Bai Juan was amused by her reaction. A trace of light flashed across his eyes. He was not in a hurry to put on his shirt. He just pulled her over and trapped her at the sink. What are you chanting by yourself? A Jew did not have time to react. As soon as she opened her eyes, her gaze met that pair of incomparably deep peach blossom eyes. The black and white were distinct, hazy and seductive. Moving further down, it was that very seductive chest. A Jew's face and neck were also red. Her reaction was direct and simple. Go and put on your clothes first. Hearing a Jew's words, Bai Juan could not help but smile. A Jew, do you want to touch it? A Jew shook her head directly. What a joke. She now knew that men and women were different. She could not touch it casually. Even if she wanted to, she could not touch it. Bai Juan was too bad. He actually used a handsome man trick on her. Fortunately, she studied Buddhism and had good willpower. Otherwise, her cultivation would be ruined. But would Bai Juan listen to her refusal? Of course not. He directly pressed her hand on his chest and the corners of his mouth curled up. How is it? At that moment, the unique warmth and dryness of a boy was like steel, jumping in her palm with thumping sounds. That kind of skin was completely opposite to her softness. Only then did a Jew truly understand what a man was. She did not know why, but whenever she thought of this word, it was as if something was about to emerge from her heart. However, at this time Bai Juan still lowered his eyes. His thin lips were less than 3 centimeters away from her ear, so when he chuckled, even his breathing would follow. A Jew inexplicably felt that the skin that her palm touched was a little hot. She wanted to retract her hand, but was pressed back by Bai Juan. Do you know how to fold a tofu quilt? Seeing that Bai Juan had mentioned something that she cared about, a Jew shook her head. She could not do things with edges and corners. She only knew how to wrap the quilt into a ball. She had been like this since she was young. During this military training, it was impossible for her to lower the average score of the class because of the quilt. There are many things to pay attention to when folding a quilt. Bai Juan smiled. Sometimes it's not that you fold it wrong but that the quilt itself is too old. But it doesn't matter. This is just the beginning. I can tutor you alone. A Jew was stunned. You can tutor me in folding a quilt? Can't you tutor me at home? Bai Juan's fingers brushed the ends of her hair. We don't have much time today. Alright, go wash your face first. We'll talk about this tomorrow. Did that mean that she was coming tomorrow too? A Jew looked at herself in the mirror and thought of the scene she had seen just now. Her face was a little red and the heat in her palm could not dissipate no matter what. Even though she was washing it with cold water, it seemed that there was still that different touch. Bai Juan did not go out. Instead, he picked up the military training uniform beside him and put it on. Then he turned his head and wrapped his hands around Aju's back. He directly held her hands. Don't you know how to use hand soap to wash your hands? With such a posture and the difference in height between the two of them, it was basically a Jew being hugged by Bai Juan. A Jew raised her head. She could only see that pure white chin and handsome side profile. Her breathing stopped for half a beat. Chapter 1270. It was always difficult to have a person behind you even if this person was the closest to you. However, such an action far exceeded the word close. A Jew did not know what to say. She felt that her fingers on her back, wherever they touched Bai Juan, were all numb. The two people's faces were reflected in the mirror at the same time. Even their postures were very clear. The sound of water flowing rang in their ears. His slender and fair fingers wrapped around the other pair of hands. Just like that, his face was as handsome as jade. This was a scene that would make anyone envious. Li Hailu was right. All of Bai Juan's emotions were used on Aju. Happiness, anger, sorrow and joy. Forbearance, possession. As well as infinite patience and gentleness. Many people said that being happy every day was not love. It was just pure liking. Love was like this. He wished he could rub her into his bone marrow, but he was also afraid that he would hurt her a little. He doted on her like a child, but he could not do anything to her. Bai Juan took a deep breath and then pushed her away. His eyes were still smiling. Wash yourself. Remember to apply hand soap. Aju was very obedient. She muttered, I always know how to apply hand soap. She just did not know what had happened to her little brother all of a sudden. All of a sudden his breathing seemed to have become especially heavy. Could it be that he had caught a cold? Aju tilted her head in confusion. In the end she decided not to think about it. She would wait for the night to properly practice how to fold the quilt. Bai Juan, who had closed the door, stood there with his slender figure. His back was against the wooden door. His black hair was still wet. It fell down just like that, making it impossible to see his expression clearly. Alaska seemed to have sensed the danger coming from its master. Just as it was about to run, Bai Juan pressed its head down. When Aju came out, this was the scene she saw. Little brother? Have you washed your face? Bai Juan did not look at her. Aju nodded and said, It's all cleaned up. We can go now. Only then did Bai Juan raise his eyes. His deep voice was a little hoarse. My tolerance is indeed not very good. Aju was dumbfounded. How did they get to this topic? Let's go. Bai Juan walked over and led the cute Aju out of the house. He had originally planned to come once a day, but now he decided to change it from once a day to twice a day. Since his patience was not good, he should extend the time he spent alone. Aju still didn't know that Bai Juan already had plans to let her come over to stay at night from tomorrow onwards. She was still thinking about how to maintain her composure. The Buddha had once said, as a qualified abbot of a temple, one must have the determination to reject beauty. The twilight was slowly fading. It was 7:30 p.m., the most important time in every dormitory. All the instructors appeared in front of the dormitory on time and walked from one dormitory to another. Every time they entered a dormitory, they would take a student's blanket and let them see how to press and fold it. However, most of the female students were already drunk when they saw Bai Juan's face. As for how Bai Juan folded the quilt, was that important? Bai Juan also saw that these students were absent-minded. He curled his thin lips and stood up. Start folding now. If you don't fold well, go downstairs and run 10 laps. The number of laps completely woke the female students up. Although Instructor Bai had a decent appearance and had an outstanding temperament, he was not someone to be trifled with. However, he was very good at scolding people. 10 laps. It was definitely not a joke. Even though they had only interacted with him for a day, they could sense that Instructor Bai was not a person who would show mercy to the fairer sex. In other words, whatever he said, he would usually do it. No one dared to step on Bai Juan's bottom line. They immediately had goosebumps and began to move their hands and feet. At that time they did not know why they were so afraid of Instructor Bai. Later on, reality proved that their fear was completely correct. Because there were a few instructors who seemed to be very afraid of Instructor Bai. It was strange. Shouldn't these people be soldiers of the same level? However, to be honest, Instructor Bai's aura was too shocking. He just stood by the door wearing white gloves with his hands crossed in front of his chest. When he looked at people with a faint smile, it also made people feel suffocated. Why did they only think that he was handsome at that time and not realize that he was so inhuman? There's still 1 minute. If you can't fold it well, you'll have to run. Bai Juan raised his eyes and looked outside. You probably don't want to go down like this in your pajamas. After all, the school's streetlights are so bright. It won't be good if you're accidentally watched by your seniors who like you without makeup. The female students were speechless. This had simply hit their soft spot. How did Instructor Bai think of such an inhumane punishment method? Aju also felt that her little brother's method was too black-bellied, but the effect was still surprisingly good. Rows of angular quilts looked like they had completely won the other major departments. Although there were still many shortcomings, on the whole they were excellent. Vice Commander Zhang also looked at the results of the examination. His eyes narrowed again and again. It was obvious that he was not convinced. He raised his hand and looked at the watch on his wrist. It's 9 o'clock now. The camouflage uniforms have been sent to you. I'm sure you've all heard that there will be an emergency assembly tonight. The quality of the assembly will affect the final military training score. In other words, this is the question of the score. Remember what I said. Set an alarm clock at 11 o'clock. Without a doubt, this last sentence revealed the exact time. The students of the performance department looked at each other. Originally, they were not interested in the final score of this kind of military training, but they did not want to be suppressed by any department. Especially after so many years, they had always been more outstanding than the archaeology department. Of course, they had to be first in everything they did. The school would be especially quiet at night. After 10 o'clock, everyone slept very soundly. However, the instructors did not sleep. They were all dressed in straight military uniforms. They stood outside the dormitory and raised their hands to look at the watches on their wrists. Professor Liang was also there. He wanted to do this emergency assembly to let the students know what iron-like discipline was. After all, the school's inheritance was there. Time's up. Blow the whistle. Professor Liang leaned on his walking stick and said. The whistle for the emergency assembly resounded throughout the entire dormitory building. Fortunately, in University A, the first-year dormitory building was separated from the second-year and third-year dormitory building, so that side would not be affected much. Aju was the first to wake up. Just like an ancient cultivation expert, she immediately flipped down from the top bunk and landed on the ground silently. While putting on her military uniform, she shook her roommate awake. Second sister, get up quickly. It's time to gather outside. What do you mean I'm about to kiss my young? What did you say? Gather. Chapter 1271. This fancy low cry caused the dormitory to be in a mess in minutes. Everyone was looking for their military pants and coats. Their hair was casually tied up and tied into a ponytail with their hands. In order to be faster, they did not even care about their image. Aju was holding a coat in her left hand, a coat in her right hand, and a few military hats. The roommates put on their coats as they walked. They patted Aju's shoulder, meaning that it was all thanks to her for waking up the sisters. Aju's actions were indeed very dazzling. They did not know where she learned that wind and fire wheel-like technique. In short, she had helped a lot. Every dormitory had basically become a pot of porridge. Only the performing arts department smiled at each other and began to run out of the dormitory. Each of them was dressed very neatly and their hair was combed very neatly. Even the buttons of their military uniforms were buttoned meticulously. Aju's speed was already very fast, but when she came down she found that the performing arts department's team had almost taken shape. There was still chaos in front of the dormitory building. The sound of going downstairs still echoed in the stairwell. Everyone was afraid of wasting even a little time. But when they all came down, they found that the others had already gathered. How did they get here so fast? The roommates looked at Aju in surprise. They were not students from the performing arts department. The main reason was that there were really a few people over there who would not go downstairs without putting on makeup. It was a waste of time to put on makeup. How did they get downstairs so quickly? Aju's round tiger eyes also glanced at the performing arts department. The students from the performing arts department stood straight, and even their faces had smiles of disdain for being with them. Vice Captain Zhang looked at the square team that had gathered on his side and took the lead to walk out. He whistled, "Attention!" Whoosh. Every student puffed out their chest. Vice Captain Zhang ran toward Professor Liang and gave a military salute. Performing Arts Department. Gathering is complete. Good, good, good. Professor Liang said 3 good words in a row. It was enough to see how happy he was. The problem corps looked at the time on their watches and frowned. Although such a gathering speed was still considered slow for them. But it was impossible for this group of university students. 2 minutes was not even enough time to put on clothes, right? Why did the Performing Arts Department gather so quickly? Lord Bai, there's something fishy about this. The soldiers came over and said to Bai Juan, that Vice Captain Zhang is obviously up to no good. Why is there such a person in the army? Bai Juan's voice was very indifferent. Don't worry about the other troops. Don't forget we are still on vacation. Are we not going to teach him a lesson? Such obvious cheating? The students and professors may not be able to detect it, but we are all aware of it. Bai Juan smiled again, his eyes a little cold. Yunhu, I said not to bother about the other troops. I didn't say that I wouldn't clean them up. A soldier has to act like a soldier. If we don't clean them up, we will lose face. When the person named Yun who heard Bai Juan's words, his eyes lit up and he returned to his original position. Anyway, Master Bai had already said so. Sooner or later, Vice Captain Zhang would be defeated. They just had to wait and see. Bai Juan took a step forward. His military boots landed on the ground and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He was not looking at his own team but at Vice Captain Zhang's side. He chuckled softly and only the two of them could hear him. The gathering was so sudden. The female students under you actually had time to put on makeup? Vice Captain Zhang, who do you think you are, a fool? Such an unfair comparison should not appear in the army. If it appears, it can only mean one thing. You are not worthy of being a soldier. When he heard the last sentence, the vice captain surnamed Zhang clenched his hands tightly. He also lowered his voice. It's just a field army without a number. How dare you judge whether I am worthy of being a soldier? If you have time, go home and watch more TV. You will know what kind of existence our army is. You can see the shadow of our army everywhere. No matter how dangerous the disaster area is, we will go to support it. It is not something that a three-legged cat like you who has never experienced anything can understand. When Bai Juan heard this, he raised his eyes to look at him again. I don't need you to tell me how good the army is. It's just that the one who went to the disaster area to provide support was not you but your senior. Don't expect your senior to plant a tree for your junior to take shelter. You are not worthy of this honor. Vice Captain Zhang was stunned by Bai Juan's words. He did not expect this person to know so much about the army. He had indeed not gone to provide any support. There were so many people in the army and not everyone needed to go. The army itself had to leave some people behind. He did not think that there was anything wrong with him being a reserve army. Vice Captain Zhang had found so many excuses for himself, but he was unwilling to admit that when the mission was not given, he would shrink back. This shrinking back was pointed out by a recruit who was even newer than him. The fire in Vice Captain Zhang's heart burned even more fiercely, and he looked at Bai Juan more and more displeasing to the eye. What do you know about honor? Captain Bai, don't think that just because your military rank is one rank higher than mine, you can really order me around. We are from the army. What about you? Until now, you still don't dare to say the number of your army. Isn't it because you are afraid of being laughed at? Let me give you a piece of advice. You are still young and haven't experienced anything. Don't pretend to be someone big. You are not qualified to talk about honor in front of me. After saying this, Vice Captain Zhang raised his leg and walked towards his battle camp. When the two recruits saw this, they came over and asked him, Vice Captain, what did that guy surnamed Bai say to you just now? Seeing that the students in our class gathered so quickly, he was jealous. Vice Captain Zhang snorted coldly. The recruit laughed when he heard this. This is only the beginning and he is already jealous? The face-slapping matter is still to come. Tomorrow the higher-ups will come to check. The shooting competition will start early. When the competition is over, I reckon that he won't have the face to continue with the military training here. He is so arrogant, but in fact he is just an embroidered pillow. Just wait to be tortured. Vice Captain Zhang did not think much of it. However, if the shooting competition was brought forward, it would be the best for him. It would save that guy surnamed Bai from being cold and indifferent in front of him. He even looked like he did not put him in his eyes. Compared to Vice Captain Zhang's indignation, Bai Juan, who should really be angry, was not angry. Instead, his thin lips curled up and his pair of peach blossom eyes looked brighter than ever. It was so bright that it made the soldiers around him shiver in unison. Chapter 1272. I'm very satisfied with the speed of the students. Professor Liang did not notice the commotion below and said with a smile, tomorrow afternoon, there will be a leader coming to our school for an inspection. Students, please show your energy today. According to the usual practice of previous years, the results of the competition will be counted into the total score. Whichever faculty wins will get the rewards they deserve. Military training is to let students show the passion that young people should have. It's late now. Everyone should go to bed early. There's still a tough battle to fight tomorrow. Professor Liang was indeed a soldier. What kind of competition became a war in his mouth? Every instructor arrived in front of their respective class. The students of the archaeology department were still puzzled. They were more or less dejected. Instructor, we tried our best to buy time, but we didn't expect that we were still a step too slow. Aju listened and did not say anything. Her big eyes looked at the instructor of the performance department again. This person looked at her little brother and really deserved a beating. Buddha Wooly had said that one could not casually make a move. If one wanted to make a move, one had to find a proper reason. Aju was more or less a little depressed. When would there be a proper reason? Bai Juan looked at the students in front of him. His voice was neither indifferent nor indifferent. Didn't Professor Liang say that tomorrow is the main event? It's just that you're a little slower than others. The points can be recovered sooner or later. What's the rush? Go back to sleep. Did this mean that he would leave the victory and defeat to him? The students did not understand. Didn't they say that their instructor was a recruit? No matter how strong Instructor Bai's aura was, it could not be compared to the army, right? They were more or less worried. However, Bai Juan had a unique persuasiveness, so the students still obediently disbanded on the spot and went upstairs. Except for Aju. She asked Bai Juan very seriously, "Little brother, can I beat up the instructor?" Bai Juan paused for a moment and then laughed. "Who do you want to beat up?" "The one who was talking to you just now." Aju looked a little valiant in her military uniform. Bai Juan stretched out his hand and straightened her military cap. "He's not worth it. Besides, if you want to be a host, shouldn't you cultivate your character?" Hearing this, Aju's cheeks also puffed up. "Last time, Master also said that my temperament wasn't enough. He even said that I shouldn't beat people up casually. He was afraid that others wouldn't be able to withstand my fist." Bai Juan was speechless. His master's worry was very reasonable. However, when did you see Master? Aju brushed her hair. "Just a while ago I went to the mountain and said that I wanted to inherit his legacy. He chased me down and gave me 2 steamed buns. He said that I was deceiving my master and destroying my ancestors." Li Hailu coughed softly at the side. "Aju, your master hasn't passed away yet and you're going to inherit his legacy? If this isn't deceiving the master and destroying the ancestors, then what is? From the looks of it, master doesn't intend to hand over the temple to me." Aju kicked the stone under her feet. "I'm going to wait for another 4 years. If he still doesn't agree after I finish college, I'll go up the mountain and snatch it." Hearing this, Li Hailu was completely silent. He looked in Bai Juan's direction. It was almost as if he was saying, "Are you not going to do anything about it?" Unexpectedly, Bai Juan only laughed softly. "When the time comes, I will help you." "Yes." Aju looked very happy. Li Hailu was speechless. "Your master raised a pair of disciples like you. He probably won't be able to live a peaceful life for the rest of his life." "And Master Bai, have your principles been fed to the dogs? You spoil women so much that you have no bottom line." Bai Juan said that, but in fact he knew very well that no one could enter that temple a second time. Aju was clearly an exception. She had a Buddhist fate. If Master really didn't like Aju, he wouldn't have given her 2 steamed buns when he chased her down the mountain. In other words, the successor in his heart had always been Aju. Thinking of this, Bai Juan narrowed his eyes. He could fulfill the dream of his beloved girl, but he would not really let Aju become a monk. This was a matter of principle. "Little brother?" Aju tilted her head and looked at Bai Juan's deep eyes. She frowned. "What's wrong with you?" Bai Juan's face returned to its usual faint smile. "Nothing. I'm just thinking about you moving out." "Moving out?" Aju's eyes were confused. "I'm not moving out." Bai Juan patted her head. "I'm worried about you living in school." Li Hailu was speechless. Aju was invincible in the entire school. What was there to be worried about? "Master Bai, your reason was too far-fetched." Aju also felt that she had nothing to worry about. Bai Juan let out a long sigh. His eyes moved slightly and his gaze actually sounded a little lonely. "Or are you saying that after being separated for a few years, you don't want to live with little brother anymore?" Li Hailu was speechless. Fuck, this was even a psychological attack. Of course, Aju couldn't bear to see her little brother like this. She immediately grabbed Bai Juan's hand back. Her beautiful little face was very serious. "I'll move out after the military training." "There's no need to wait until the military training is over. I've already written the application for day school for you. You can just hand it to the homeroom teacher tomorrow." Bai Juan smiled faintly and handed Aju a handwritten piece of paper. Aju more or less understood that her little brother had used a trick on her. However, she knew even more clearly that her little brother really wanted her to live with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the time to write such an application. But there was one thing: she was very uncertain about herself. What if she wanted to push him down again while she was asleep? Sigh, it was really troublesome to be a qualified candidate for the temple's abbot. She always had to resist all kinds of temptations. Her biggest temptation now was her little brother. She always felt that after coming back this time, her little brother's entire body was emitting the unique charm of a man. That's right, a man who was very good at flirting with girls. She didn't know if she could control it. The next morning, Aju was still thinking about this problem. When she saw Bai Juan, who was wearing a military uniform, walking towards her, she inexplicably remembered the scene where he hugged her from behind and washed her hands. It seemed that everywhere was hot. Bai Juan did not know what Aju was thinking. He only took a gun with one hand. Today we'll talk about shooting. Ordinary students would not be able to come into contact with shooting during military training. However, University A was different. They had it every year. This was also the training that the students looked forward to the most. After all, everyone had a desire to hold a gun in their hearts, regardless of whether it was a boy or a girl. However, when they really came into contact with a gun, they realized that that thing was simply too heavy. The army did not provide many guns. There were only 3 guns in each class and there were no bullets in them at all. They let them take turns to hold them and learn the posture first. Chapter 1273. Huff huff, I can't take it anymore. This gun is so heavy. How did Instructor Bai pick it up with one hand? You shouldn't ask Instructor Bai how to pick it up. You should ask Aju how she can carry one in one hand and still do it properly. Even the boys can't do it. Wooly, Aju is better than the boys at anything. She's just so manly. Aju's actions had indeed stunned many people. Bai Juan was afraid that it would dampen the enthusiasm of the male students in the class. So he took the gun from Aju's hand and gave her a mission to buy water for the entire class. Of course, other than the fact that Aju was too capable, Bai Juan did not want her to lie on the ground and learn the shooting posture that she already knew when she was not feeling well. Bai Juan was a sniper. One look at Aju's actions and he knew that she had learned it before. When she was young, Bai Juan had never taught her how to hold a gun. Now it seemed that it was her family who had taught her. Her technique was very experienced. Such a person would be top-notch even in the army. His Aju had really changed a lot when he was not around. Little brother, should we distribute the water now? Aju raised her delicate little face. Even though she was wearing a military uniform, she still gave people a silly and cute feeling. It was probably because the 2 strands of hair on her head could not be suppressed no matter how hard she tried. Bai Juan looked at her and the corners of his mouth curled up. Distribute it all. You can't drink it. I brought you a thermos with red dates in it. Go and drink the water in my thermos. Because Aju had just exercised, her small face was flushed red. She obediently nodded and wanted to run. The students had all dispersed to rest. All their attention was on the mineral water. Seeing this, Bai Juan turned sideways and pulled Aju back. He lowered his voice and asked, "How's the packing? What is it?" Aju was a little puzzled. Bai Juan reminded her, "The things in the dormitory. It's all packed." When Aju spoke, she was still trying her best to suppress the hair on her head. Bai Juan held it in for a long time before he did not hug such a cute girl into his arms. He said in a hoarse voice, "After the training ends, I have a meeting here. Someone will pick you up then. I'll go there myself." Aju felt that it would be inconvenient to send another person. Anyway, that place was close to the school. Bai Juan also did not want anyone other than Aju to enter his apartment. He paused and took out a bunch of keys from his pocket. "If there's any problem, call me." "All right." When Aju took the key, Li Hailu happened to pass by this place. He walked back and forth twice. When Aju picked up the thermos and started to drink water, Li Hailu directly put his hand on Bai Juan's shoulder. "Master Bai, I wanted to ask you yesterday. You want to kidnap Aju to live with you so much. Are you trying to hide her?" Originally, he thought that it would take some time for him to admit it. Unexpectedly, Bai Juan only glanced at him indifferently and said, "Yes, so this place is very inconvenient for you to visit." After Li Hailu heard Bai Juan's words, he realized that he was the one who was tricked in the end. This also meant that he couldn't find an excuse to go to that house in the future. If he had known earlier, he would have called Xiao Lin. A person like him who did not know how to use idioms should have consulted the Ministry of Foreign Affairs first. What a mistake. At this moment the bell rang. It was noon and it was time for the teachers and students to go to eat. Because there were people coming from above, the instructors all had other places to go, so they did not appear in the cafeteria on the second floor like yesterday. Professor Liang personally received the group of people. When Vice Captain Zhang and the others saw the people who came, they all respectfully saluted. The soldiers stood at the back of the team and looked at each other. They did not say anything, but the meaning in their eyes was basically understood. Who is this? I don't know. It seems like he has a big background. He doesn't even have as many ears as Master Bai. Is this a big background? If he really had a big background, I would have seen him at my mother's place long ago. Don't forget what she is in charge of. In my mother's heart, Master Bai is the most important. Your mother likes Master Bai so much that she almost married you to him. That won't do. I'm a man. You still know that you're a man. Bai Juan was the leader. Even if the people who came were not in line with them, they still had to show respect. Seeing that the few troublesome people kept shaking their heads, their eyes directly swept over. The soldiers left and stood up straight. They no longer exchanged glances. In any case, they were under old Zhao's protection. They were not afraid of officials. At most, when they did something bad, they would leave old Zhao's name behind. President Zhao, who had countless ears on his shoulder, sneezed heavily. He was still commanding the battle when he suddenly felt a chill on his back. He pulled the adjutant beside him over. How are those bastards in school? The adjutant was also a little stunned by the sudden question. They should be fine. Good is good, bad is bad. What do you mean they should be fine? President Zhao was very angry. The adjutant comforted him. President, don't worry. Master Bai is the person who is about to take over your position. No one can bully them. Do you think I'm worried that they will be bullied? President Zhao scratched his prickly head. I keep feeling that something is not right. The army has already informed them that they will be the ones going over, right? The adjutant paused for a moment. Master Bai and the others' identities have always been very special. They can't reveal their numbers, right? So you don't know. Yes, it's good that you don't know. President Zhao thought for a moment and stood up again. Good my ass. Without that identity, these bastards are even more reckless. The adjutant continued to comfort him. It's okay, President. At most, they can still say that they came out from under you. President Zhao was speechless. Everyone sit down. Don't stand. Everyone sit down so that you won't be reserved. At the school's reception desk, the man in military uniform came to speak. He pressed his palm down. Vice Captain Zhang seemed to be very obedient to him. As soon as he opened his mouth, the few soldiers on the other side all sat down. Their movements were very orderly, which made Bai Juan and the others seem a little slow. There were a total of 6 people in the problem army. Other than Bai Juan, 3 of them came from Sharp Blade and 2 of them were about to enter Sharp Blade. They were all people who had carried out many secret missions. To be honest, other than the orders of Bai Juan and some important leaders, they rarely listened to anyone, which was why their reaction was a little slow. Vice Captain Zhang snorted mockingly, thinking that they were new recruits who had not seen much of the world. Chapter 1274. The dishes were all served, and the people who came did not do anything special. The dishes on the table were all from the staff cafeteria. Professor Liang also took the walking stick beside him. He sat there and raised the wine glass in his hand. They exchanged pleasantries happily and harmoniously. After a while, Li Yanfeng smiled again. I heard that the students from the Performing Arts Department are all doing well in this military training. Which instructor is leading them? When Vice Captain Zhang saw that he had been called out, he first looked at Bai Juan and the others proudly. Then he stood up and saluted the people at the table. Good, good. Li Yanfeng seemed to be very happy. He tilted his head and asked his good friend beside him, not bad. Let Tong Tong come in first and let her take a good look at her. That child usually keeps a low profile and doesn't want the students in the school to know her identity. Lu Xiang thought that his daughter was a worry-free person, but he didn't know how she behaved outside. Li Yanfeng heard this and glanced at the soldier beside him. Go and bring in the little girl waiting outside the door. Tell her that Uncle Li and her father want to see her. Professor Liang knew Lu Zitong's identity. He chuckled and said, President Liu is here to see his daughter today. As a parent, I'm always worried. Liu xianed and raised his wine glass and clinked it with Professor Liang. Vice Captain Zhang listened at the side, but his expression changed a little. Long before he came to the military training, he had heard that the students of University A might be able to meet someone with a strong background by chance. He was also familiar with the name Lu Zitong. She was an influential figure in his team. He didn't look like an ordinary university student, but he didn't expect her family background to be so good. The more Vice Captain Zhang thought about it, the happier he became. Lu Zitong was in his class. Just this relationship alone was of great help to him. The soldiers all acted as if they did not hear him. They lowered their heads and ate the rice in their bowls. Their eating manners were also different. Some of them were especially forthright, displaying the energy of a soldier to the fullest. Some of them were like rich young masters who were sloppy. Of course, there was also someone like Bai Juan. No matter what he ate, it made people feel like he was eating a French meal. Even his fingertips were filled with bone-chilling elegance. This was the scene that Lu Zitong saw when she came in. Her bright eyes looked at Bai Juan reluctantly. Anyone could tell what she meant. Li Hailu sat at the side and frowned heavily. The problem armies were even more stunned. What was going on? Did she take a fancy to their Lord Bai? Wasn't this courting death? Master Bai had a wife. Although his wife was a little monk, she was still an adorable little monk. Master Bai would not give any woman other than his wife any face. It was even crueler than the cold wind sweeping the fallen leaves. Lu xianed and coughed heavily when he saw his daughter staring at an officer. Only then did Lu Zitong turn around with a smile. She said graciously, Dad, Uncle Li, Professor Liang. Sit down. Li Yanfeng said to Lu Zitong, your dad was just saying that you don't eat well. They were relatives to begin with. In addition, the two families had supported each other for so many years, so of course they were close. Lu Zitong glanced in Bai Juan's direction and said, Uncle Li, I won't sit. You adults are talking about time. As a student, I'm breaking the rules by sitting here. Moreover, the instructors are still sitting over there. You've grown up and know the rules. Li Yanfeng smiled and raised his hand again. Vice Captain Zhang, come over here for a moment. Vice Captain Zhang immediately put down his chopsticks and walked over when he saw that his regiment commander was calling him. You've trained people well. Change places with that instructor just now and lead them. Li Yanfeng's words were beautiful. After hearing this sentence, Vice Captain Zhang was completely dumbfounded. Change places? What did he mean? Let him go to the archaeology department? He was just happy that Lu Zitong was in their class, but now he was transferred to another department. Vice Captain Zhang's eyes widened as he followed Li Yanfeng's gaze. When he saw that the person he was talking about was none other than Bai Juan, the fire in his heart burned even more fiercely. However, the order was given by his superior, so he had no choice but to obey. He only looked in Bai Juan's direction with bloodshot eyes and gritted his teeth. He did not say yes or no. From the moment Lu Zitong came in, Li Yanfeng had already guessed which instructor she wanted to change. However, it was inevitable that such a thing would have a bad effect if a girl said it, so it was better for him to say it directly. As expected, after Lu Zitong heard Li Yanfeng's words, she looked at Bai Juan's godlike noble and handsome face. Her cheeks turned even redder and there was a faint hint of shyness. Vice Captain Zhang also saw what was going on. Of course, he would not question anything in front of everyone. He clenched his fists, lowered his head and said, yes. A voice slowly sounded from the other side. It was neither cold nor indifferent, but it was a little like an ancient sword being unsheathed. It carried a slight vibration. The military training will last for 10 days. The class has been set since the beginning. Changing people halfway will only affect the students' emotions. Commander Li is now proposing to exchange officers. Is it because of a military order or because of personal reasons? The last sentence made Li Yanfeng feel a little embarrassed. He only opened his mouth and laughed. Whose soldier is this? Not bad. He dares to speak. The officers looked at each other. In the end, the captain reported in a low voice, Commander Li, they are not from our army. Not from the army? Then they were the few people who suddenly appeared out of nowhere? When Li Yanfeng thought of this, he was stunned for a moment. He still could not figure out the identity of the other party, but when the chief picked up the phone, he was also present. He saw that the chief was very respectful to the person on the phone, so it could be seen that one or two of them were involved. Lu Zitong saw that he was hesitating and called out in a low voice, "Uncle Li Lu Xian," and saw that Li Yanfeng was in a difficult position, so he interrupted his daughter. "Zitong, if there's nothing else, you should go and eat first. You still have military training in a while. Your Uncle Li and the others still have serious matters to discuss." "Dad." Lu Zitong still wanted to say something. Lu Xian and lowered his voice. "Go quickly." When Lu Zitong heard this, her expression turned ugly. Only then did she reluctantly raise her feet and walk out of the door. She had never thought that even Uncle Li would not make her wish come true. Before she came, she had already made an agreement with the people in the dormitory that this time, she would definitely let Bai Jun be their instructor. Now that things had turned out like this, and when she saw that Bai Jun did not even look at her, Lu Zitong only felt that she had been slapped in the face in public. She felt indescribably uncomfortable. She had already done this, but why did that instructor Bai still look at her as if she did not exist? Chapter 1275. In the hall, the atmosphere had yet to recover. Li Yanfeng and Bai Jun looked at each other. Only then did they feel that those long and narrow black eyes looked somewhat familiar. But for a moment he forgot where he had seen them before. Where exactly were they? Bai Jun did not give him time to see clearly. He just sat back down holding the wooden chopsticks in his hand. He looked calm as if nothing had happened just now. Vice Captain Zhang thought to himself that it was fine if this person was usually arrogant, but he was still so arrogant in front of Commander Li. He was really stupid as a soldier. It was good that Bai Jun did not change. Whichever class had Lu Zitong, the results of that class would not be too bad. The most important thing was not the results, but being noticed by the higher-ups. Vice Captain Zhang had a lot of thoughts, but no matter how much he thought, he could not hide the embarrassment in his heart. The matter that Commander Li had mentioned just now was simply an insult to him. Even if he stayed in the current class, it was as if Bai Jun had given it to him. What was this? He was being bullied by a random soldier from God knows where? The more Vice Captain Zhang thought about it, the gloomier his face became. His eyes were full of gunpowder as he looked at Bai Jun. How could Li Yanfeng not see the undercurrent below? He quickly restrained his thoughts and laughed. "I heard from your captain that there is a shooting competition in the afternoon. President Liu and I won't be leaving today. You guys have to perform well and not embarrass our army." "Yes." When Vice Captain Zhang said this word, it was obvious that he used a lot of strength. There were a few people from the army who did not like Bai Jun and the others. At this moment they were all looking in their direction. For no reason there was an additional sense of provocation. The problem soldiers, on the other hand, did not think much of it. It was not a team competition. With only Master Bai around, they did not need to appear at all. One had to know that Master Bai's code name was Viper. Hiding, attacking and not missing a bullet. Vice Captain, eat more. Show them what you're capable of later. Someone picked up some food into Vice Captain Zhang's bowl with his chopsticks. It was as if they had already won. Vice Captain Zhang was even more immodest. He sneered, "It's time to let them know what they're capable of." The meal was not eaten very quickly. After all, there were still people sitting on the table. Especially with Professor Liang around, it was inevitable that they would say a few words. There was a long lunch break at a university. The moment Lu Zitong entered the dormitory, someone asked her, "Zitong, how's the situation? Is it because our instructor has changed?" Uncle Li didn't agree. After Lu Zitong finished speaking, she added, "He said that Vice Commander Zhang is a good soldier in their army. With him leading us, we can get a high score in the final round. Also, there will be a shooting competition in the afternoon. The students and instructors will participate. How long have we been holding guns? How many points have we scored? The key to winning or losing will depend on the instructors. Vice Commander Zhang is famous in the army for shooting. With him we have already won." After I heard that, I decided not to change the instructor. If I were to change Vice Captain Zhang to the archaeology department when they win, wouldn't they go to the heavens? After hearing Lu Zitong's explanation, her roommates also felt that it was reasonable. However, they said, "I really want to take a closer look at Instructor Bai. I always feel that he is particularly handsome even when he walks." "Alright, now is not the time to be infatuated. How can military training compare to being able to suppress those people from the archaeology department all the time?" Someone said, "Look at them." "Master, is it really okay for you to lie through your teeth like this? Do you really not know why I didn't come out? You actually want this Hercules to live here from now on? Woof, there's no way to live in the future." A Jew thought for a moment and took a photo of herself and the dog. She directly sent it to Bai Juan. "It was pulled out by me. It shouldn't be shy anymore, right?" Bai Juan glanced at his beloved dog, who seemed to have exhausted all its strength. He curled his lips and smiled. Then he lowered his head and replied. Chapter 1276. Yes, I'm not shy anymore. These 5 words were very calm and unhurried. She did not feel ashamed at all. Alaska was speechless. "Master, I really didn't expect you to be such a master. Don't bully us dogs for being illiterate." After a Jew saw that reply, she held the dog's face and rubbed it hard. Alaska was no longer in the mood to say anything. It stretched out its paws and cosplayed as a bear. A Jew squatted beside it. Seeing that it seemed to be hungry, she quickly mixed a plate of dog food for Alaska. Then she filled it with water from the basin beside it. In the end, Alaska was satisfied with the food and began to rub against the ground. To be honest, other than being a little stronger, Hercules was very domestic in other aspects. Compared to the women it had seen before who only had eyes for its master, she was much better. "Little Allah, if you're thirsty, drink the water over there. Also, you can't eat the dog food casually. When little brother and I come back in the afternoon, we'll bring you ham sausages," a Jew instructed Alaska as she went to change her shoes. When Alaska heard the words ham sausages, its ears pricked up. One had to know that although its master was a good master, he was very careless when it came to food. They had been raised in the army and had already developed a rough stomach. It was fine as long as they had something to eat. Only when it barked at the ham sausages would its master be merciful and buy it 1 or 2. In the army there were canned foods to eat, but it personally preferred ham sausages. A Jew knew that it wanted to eat just by looking at it. She smiled and rubbed its dog face again. "Wait for it. We'll be back after training." At this moment, Alaska was both painful and happy. It was still good to have a mistress at home. In the future it would not have to eat those dry food with its master anymore. Bai Juan indeed did not care about food. In the past he was such a noble young master in the military. After going to the army he did not say a word about eating a cold pot of rice. At that time Chief Zhao was surprised for a long time. In the end he silently watched him swallow the dry rice grains one by one. He knew that this kid had a great future. He was flexible and did not want to be special. He was not only like the Bai family but also like the Tang family. After all, if he asked to heat up the rice with his status, this request would not be too much. When Bai Juan entered the army, the old man did not say anything, but his heart was half happy and half sad. He no longer had a son, so how could he bear to let his only grandson go to the border again? It was not that old Master Bai had not thought of retreating. As long as Bai Juan said no, he could immediately use his connections to get him to come back. However, from the beginning to the end, Bai Juan's patience and responsibility had already exceeded the imagination of too many people. 1 call a year. In the content of the call, other than hearing him tell him to take care of his body, old Master Bai was also inquiring about a Jew. In the first year, Bai Juan was seriously injured and the border was very cold. Old Master Bai had also asked, "Why don't you come back first?" There was silence on the other side of the phone for a while before a voice came through. "Grandpa, I'm needed here." The word grandfather made old Master Bai's eyes turn red. At that time Bai Juan was only 18 years old. 18 years old at this age was originally the most youthful, brilliant, carefree age. However, Bai Juan carried too much on his back. "Moreover, I can't run away at the last minute. Only when I become strong enough can I protect the people I want to protect without any scruples. Grandfather is old and a Jew is still young." With just a few words, old Master Bai knew that he had changed his grandson's mind. As a soldier, Bai Juan was very qualified. It was precisely because he was too qualified that old Master Bai felt guilty towards him. However, such a person could not tell the whole world what he had done. This was because the mission they carried out was too confidential. He could not say who he had protected. He could not say where he had gone. He could not say what had happened to the injuries on his body. Bai Juan had too many secrets. He had thought about it countless times. Fortunately, he had met a Jew. For soldiers like them, some of them were seriously injured and could not continue. They could only find a girl when they retreated. They had to give the girl a sense of trust and security. However, there were so many things that could not be said which caused some unhappiness. Even his family had to be hidden from him. Bai Jun had seen his comrades who had gone on blind dates in his hometown. Sometimes his blind date did not even know that the blood flowing in his body might have once saved this country. He would only ask if he had a house in the school district. Of course, this was only a part of it. Bai Jun was not cynical. He was just grateful that he had met such a person since he was young. No matter what you become, no matter how long you disappear, she will not change. She will only wait for you in the same place. Thinking of this, Bai Jun lowered his head and looked at the WeChat photo on his phone. The corners of his mouth could not help but curve up. Vice Captain Zhang caught his smile and snorted disdainfully. Just you wait. You won't be able to smile in the afternoon. His voice was lowered, but the provocation was real. When the soldiers beside him heard this, they all wanted to throw down their bowls and chopsticks, stand up and teach him a lesson on the spot. Bai Jun blocked with his arm, his expression very calm. The soldiers looked at each other. Even though their chests were heaving up and down, they were very obedient and immediately sat back down in their original positions. Damn it, this Zhang guy was simply asking for a beating. Master Bai was not around, so they did not care about the military rules. They would beat him up first. Anyway, even if he caused trouble, his father would block it. The reason why Chief Zhao could not leave Bai Jun was also because of the temperament of this group of ancestors. The soldiers were good soldiers. They were not afraid of death and they were also obedient enough. It was just that sometimes they were like Tibetan mastiffs, biting whoever they caught. Other than Bai Jun, no one could tame them. Li Yanfeng and Professor Liang also noticed the commotion here. They put down their cups and looked over. What's going on? The person who asked was Li Yanfeng. Vice Captain Zhang stood up and said, reporting, the people on Captain Bai's side can't wait any longer. They want to have a good shooting competition with our army. Hearing this, Li Yanfeng laughed. He pointed at them and said to Professor Liang, when I was young I was just like them. If there was a competition in this army, I would definitely be full of vigor and not give in to anyone. Professor Liang also smiled. The army needs people with vigor. It's about time. Tell them to go down and prepare. Change their clothes and bring their guns. Tell all the classes to gather. Li Yanfeng also raised his hand to look at the time on his watch. The lunch break was indeed over. He said to the people below, go, don't embarrass us soldiers. Yes. As soon as Vice Captain Zhang raised his hand, he gave a smug look to the soldiers. However, what he did not expect was that the group of people actually laughed at this time. They sat casually in their seats and laughed casually, as if they did not take him seriously at all. Chapter 1277. Bai Jun took the military cap beside him and stood up as well. He only said the word go to the few people behind him. The soldiers were not worried now. The shooting competition was about to begin, so what were they worried about? All of them left wearing military caps. As soon as the assembly signal sounded, each class formed rows of square teams as quickly as possible. The students were all wearing camouflage uniforms. Regardless of whether they were boys or girls, they all looked as if they already had the toughness that they should have. A Jew was also standing in the middle of the team. Her waist-length black hair was tied into a ponytail by her. There was no gravity buckle on her wrist. Instead, she was wearing a black wristband. She had an indescribable handsomeness. Everyone should have heard that we have a competition today. Bai Jun faced the square team of their class and stood tall and straight. A shooting competition. All the students knew this, but no one expected it to come so soon. Instructor Bai, we can't even hold our guns properly. The performance department started a day earlier than us. It seems that since yesterday their instructor has let them touch guns. What should we do now? There are more girls in our department than in theirs this year. It's probably going to be difficult. Bai Jun listened to the students' worries, but the expression on his face did not change at all. On the other side, Li Yanfeng and the others had already walked over. They were all leaders, so they specially came down to take a look. Lu Xianen was also there. He was wearing a suit which was enough to see his business aura. When he walked to the performance department, he paused and looked at Lu Zitong. Lu Zitong was originally standing in the front row. She was not tall, but because she was good-looking, people ignored the problem of her height. Li Yanfeng also stopped and specially adjusted Lu Zitong's military cap. He laughed loudly and said, "Perform well, understand?" "Yes, Uncle Li." Lu Zitong's entire face lit up at this moment. What was the big deal about being rejected in the cafeteria just now? Looking at it now, all the teachers and students in the school still had to look at her in amazement. Lu Xiang and reminded her again, "Don't embarrass your Uncle Li." Lu Zitong smiled and said, "I got it. Dad, you'd better leave quickly." Lu Xian shook his head and turned his face to say a few words to Professor Liang. After the group of them left, the performing arts department blew up. "Zitong, that's the commander of the army. You know him? His background is too strong." Lu Zitong smiled reservedly, enjoying the envious looks from all around her. She didn't say anything. But just this scene alone made the performing arts department feel even more confident. This time the archaeology department is not dumbfounded. Previously, I thought that their instructor was handsome and felt uncomfortable. But now it seems that no matter how handsome he is, his ability is not good enough. Our instructor Zhang is the one with the most combat experience in the army. He's also very good at shooting. We've also asked around about the Bai guy. It turns out that he's not from the army at all. I don't know which random army he's from, but he suddenly came in without any ability at all. Although they were from different faculties because they were the first team, they were now 2 classes next to each other. As they spoke, the people from the archaeology department could hear them. All of them were extremely angry. After all, this was how it was during military training. No one was willing to hear others badmouth their instructor. However, when they turned around, they saw that Bai Juan did not have any emotional fluctuations. They did not know what to do. At this moment, a whistle was blown from above. The general idea was for all the instructors to gather. Chapter 1278. Lu Zitong took these 2 steps with great confidence. The students' shooting requirements were obviously different from the instructors. It was impossible for them to walk to the shooting range with their guns. This was too much of a burden for them. The method used was to directly set up the gun at the shooting distance and lower the butt of the gun. As long as they could pick up the gun, put it on their shoulders and crawl to shoot. In other words, no matter how strong the grade skipper was, she would not be able to use it in this segment. Lu Zitong walked to her position and glanced in Aju's direction. The meaning on her face was very obvious. It was obvious that she did not like Aju. Aju did not even look at her. She turned the black wristband on her other hand and was looking down at her feet. Unlike the others, she looked a little confused. The smile on Lu Zitong's face became even wider as she raised her eyebrows. "Everyone listen up, get down." There was another swoosh. Everyone got down, their eyes on the same level as the gun. When it came to shooting, if one did not have talent, what they practiced was their usual familiarity. It had to be said that Lu Zitong's posture was very good. It was obvious that she had come into contact with this aspect before. Although the others also got down, their postures were very ugly. There were all kinds of crooked postures. However, it was also very good to have such an effect in less than a day. At the very least, their reaction speed was fast enough. Aju also got into position, but she did not immediately take the gun. Instead, she raised her head and looked at the target in the distance. Right at this moment, there was a bang. Lu Zitong had already fired the first shot, and the others also raised their long guns. There was a time limit in the shooting competition. There was a total of 5 bullets. The shorter the time, the higher the hit rate, and the winner would be the one who won. And now, Aju, who was 1 step behind the others, was obviously at a disadvantage. In addition, Lu Zitong's shooting had achieved a good score of 8 points. This was simply unbelievable for a female student. One had to know that many people could not even hit the target when they fired for the first time. It was not uncommon for them to miss the target directly or only hit the edge of the target. Therefore, there were not many people who could achieve Lu Zitong's result. Li Yanfeng was the first to applaud. Even Professor Liang could not help but say, "Not bad." At the same time, Aju directly placed the long gun on her body. She half lay on the grass and used her shoulders as support. She narrowed her eyes slightly and was so quiet that it was as if she was embedded in the ground. Shooting was not something that could be won just by being fast. Instead, he had to be as nimble as a rabbit and as still as a virgin, waiting for the right time to shoot. Vice Captain Zhang was still quite proud of himself as he straightened his back. Lu Zitong was his student. Lu Zitong's grades were good, which meant that he taught well. Thinking of this, he even deliberately looked in Bai Jun's direction. His tail was almost curled up. Bai Jun just smiled for some reason. At this time, Lu Zitong had already begun to adjust her breathing. She was ready to fire the second shot. As the saying goes, one can only shoot accurately with good aim. Her shot this time was definitely better than the previous one. With such confidence, Lu Zitong was just about to pull the trigger when she heard a bang. A bullet flew out from her left. Before he could finish speaking, a second sound was heard. Then it was the third, the fourth, the fifth. A total of 5 gunshots rang out magnificently. There was not even a chance to take a breather in between. That speed was so fast that it made people click their tongues. The wind rustled past their ears and no one could react in time. Lu Zitong was also stunned. Then she wanted to continue disapprovingly. In any case, she was shooting so fast that she definitely wouldn't be able to hit a single shot. It was obvious that he was a layman when he fired like this. The most taboo thing for gunmen was to fire many shots in a row. If the first shot was not accurate, if one was given time to adjust, they could still have a chance to correct it again. However, the other party did not even give them time to correct it. Wasn't this a game? It's obviously a random shot. What's going on with the archaeology department? Did they just give up? It's probably because they heard that Zitong could get such good results that they simply gave up on themselves. What did I say just now? I told some people not to overestimate themselves. Didn't they expose themselves in the competition? You can't say that. At the very least, she can pick up a gun. Her strength is something that ordinary girls like us can't compare to. Didn't she still lose with great strength? Heh. These mocking voices made the people from the archaeology department very uncomfortable, especially those from a Jew's dormitory. They glared fiercely at them. The people from the performance department were disdainful. What are you looking at? What? Can't you afford to lose? However, at this moment, the ring member who had been frozen suddenly shouted in a hoarse voice, "The first target is 9. 7. The second target is 9. 8. The fifth target is 10 points. Every shot was a score of more than 9 points, and the last shot even hit the center of the circle. The ring member could not believe what he saw at all, which was why he froze on the spot for a long time at the beginning. This result was only obtained after he confirmed it again and again. Moreover, the first target could actually be said to be 9. 8. However, a student had achieved such a good result, how could the instructors continue to fight? Even Li Yanfeng could not help but raise his eyebrows when he heard this result. Just from his expression one could tell how shocked he was. Vice Captain Zhang's eyes widened even more and his fingers tightened. Even he might not be able to achieve such a result. In fact, it was very likely that he was not as good as a Jew. After all, he had once added up 5 rings and his best result was still a full 5 rings worse than a Jew's. Moreover, she used too little time. 5 shots in a row and the soldiers at the side were all dumbfounded. It was one thing for Lord Bai to be abnormal. How could such a cute Jew be so abnormal? Although they could shoot 5 shots in a row, they were all small guns. For example, if there was a slight deviation in a powerful sniper rifle like a weight, they would not be able to shoot so accurately. After all, when they could not bear the weight, their fingers would involuntarily tremble. A person like a Jew could simply join their army and be a seeded player in the first round. Chapter 1279. The archaeology department did not look at them. Instead, they hugged a Jew who was walking back. Their voices were filled with joy. "A Jew, you are indeed our department's cute pet. My boyfriend is off the charts. Come and give me a kiss." The girls were really kissing. They kissed a Jew's big head. A Jew reached out and touched her head. She raised her eyes and smiled. Her face was even more beautiful. Lu Zitong was so angry that she did not even care about the rules. She flung her hand and did not even pay attention to her good friends beside her. Her formation was also different from before. The young lady's temper was on the verge of exploding. The people from the performance department comforted her. "This is nothing. Our total score is only a little lower than the archaeology department's. When the instructor goes on stage later, we will immediately catch up." After Lu Zitong heard this, her heart felt a little more at ease. Thinking about what her Uncle Li had said earlier, her gaze towards the front returned to its previous arrogance. Li Yanfeng, on the other hand, laughed out loud. Professor Liang, your University A is really full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. This little girl is not simple. 5 shots in a row is rare even in our army. As he spoke, he shifted his gaze to the instructors. All of you have to work hard. If you can't get a good result later and can't even compare to the students, it will be embarrassing. These words were a warning. Vice Captain Zhang naturally understood and immediately said, "Don't worry, Captain. Alright, you guys can go too." With Li Yanfeng's order, the whistle sounded and more than 30 targets were pushed back another meter at the same time. The range of the instructors was originally farther than that of the students. This was set from the beginning. But Aju did not know that. When she saw the targets move back 1 meter, she lowered her head and muttered, "I was wondering what was strange." It turned out that the distance was too close. That's right. The reason why Aju didn't get 5-10 points was that this shooting distance was different from her usual shooting habits. At the beginning, she was also adjusting herself when she was looking at it. Other than Bai Juan, no one could see this point. That was why Master Bai showed a meaningful doting look. The roommate standing next to Aju thought that she had heard wrongly. Are you saying that the distance just now was too close? That's right. Aju's face was serious. A heavy gun like this is suitable for a longer range. At such a close distance, it is actually more suitable to use a light gun like the K4 to aim. Aju's roommates were speechless. He sounded so professional. They were really dumbfounded. However, from what Aju said, it seemed that she would be able to hit more accurately if they were further away. All of a sudden, everyone felt their knees go weak. In the past, they only knew that Aju was very strong. Now they realized that she was hiding a lot of things that they did not know at all. For example, her adoptive relationship with Instructor Bai was very rare. Moreover, from the moment they entered the school until now, no one had seen Aju's parents. Other than her surname, it seemed that they did not know anything about Aju. For example, where was she from? There were some senior sisters who recognized her, but when they saw her, they all blushed and their hearts raced. It was as if she had seen her idol. So what else did they not know about Aju? "Tisk, Lu Zitong sneered. "Sounds good, but it's not that easy to do. As expected, it's easy to talk. The further away you are, the more difficult it is to shoot. You even talked about heavy guns and light guns. Who are you trying to fool?" As soon as she said this, Aju's roommates immediately retaliated. "I really don't understand what right a loser has to talk about our Aju. Isn't her face swollen enough? You..." Lu Zitong was so angry that her face turned a little green. Then she saw the instructor standing there checking the guns. The corners of her mouth curled up. "What loser? It's not certain who will win or lose. Don't think that you can do anything just because of luck. The instructors haven't made a move yet." The instructors' shooting competition was a few more points than the students. One of them was that they had to crawl forward with guns, and there would be 3 obstacles in front of them. Professor Liang's design was to let the students truly experience how the soldiers in the army usually trained, so that they could learn what hard work was. It had to be said that the teaching tradition of University A was indeed good, and the method was also right. However, with Vice Captain Zhang in it, what was supposed to be a demonstration was filled with the smell of gunpowder. "Everyone listen up." The sentry raised his left hand and the whistle sounded. "Let's go." With a clang, everyone picked up the long spear on their right hand. Vice Captain Zhang's position was the best, and the angle of his rush out was also the best. The first obstacle was to climb over the fake wall. His strength was not bad. He held the gun in his right hand and clung to the wall with his left hand. After a few kicks, he climbed over. Vice Captain Zhang was a person with a lot of thoughts. In addition, the weather in the imperial capital was very dry. It had not rained for a few days, so the dust on the field was easily raised. Therefore, when they set off while others were not paying attention, he deliberately used force with his feet and kicked the sand to the left. The people who set off from that position were none other than the problem soldiers of the archaeology department. Bai Juan took the lead. In order to protect his eyes, there was definitely a moment of pause. Therefore, the instructors on that side had already touched the wall, but the problem soldiers on this side were still in their original positions. Fuck, they actually cheated. Someone on the problem soldier's side was really fooled and rubbed their eyes with all their might. Because of such an action, Bai Juan was completely enraged. Everyone could see that the person whose eyes had been indifferent since he entered the school until now was releasing a vicious aura in his eyes. It was as if he had suddenly been touched by a poisonous snake or a fierce tiger. In an instant he erupted with a speed that no one could have imagined. Only the problem soldiers knew why Bai Jun was like this. Every time they went out to carry out a mission, even if Master Bai was injured, he would try his best to ensure the safety of all of them. To him, while completing the mission, he would be able to let everyone return safely. Only then would he be able to live up to the people who had handed them over to him. But now, because of such a small competition, the other party actually made one of the people's eyes turn red. How could Vice Captain Zhang not know how important the eyes of a soldier were? Obviously, a person like Vice Captain Zhang did not feel guilty. At this moment he was feeling confident that he could be the first to climb over the wall. However, at this moment, suddenly a figure appeared on his left side. That person was like a cheetah with smooth lines. He had to use all his strength to hold on to the fake wall, but he took a step to the center. Then he held a gun in his left hand and used his right arm as a support. With a long leg, he flipped over the fake wall and landed beautifully and handsomely. His movements were shockingly fast. Chapter 1280. When the sound of the wind came, Vice Captain Zhang finally saw the face of that figure clearly. Handsome, noble, incomparable. Was that Bai Jun? How could this be? How could his speed be so fast? Vice Captain Zhang's eyes were still swaying. On the other side, Bai Jun did not give him any time to think. He slid sideways and used his own impact to drill into the sand net. Then he swept his long spear and aimed the muzzle at the bullseye in the distance. Whether it was his posture or the strength of holding the gun, he was so handsome that all the teachers and students widened their eyes. That kind of scene could really make people blush and their hearts beat faster. Cool. Aju, Instructor Bai is really too cool. When Aju heard this, she nodded in agreement. She had always known how handsome the little brother was. Although her shooting was also very fast and accurate, it was still different from the little brother. Not only was he fast and accurate, but he was also smooth. He guided like an arm and then gave the enemy a fatal blow. It was perfect without any flaws. Almost everyone present had an illusion. It was as if there was always a shooting line in Bai Jun's line of sight. Regardless of whether he had a gun in his hand or not, that line would always exist as if it was real. He didn't need to think about these things. All he needed to do was to fire the gun. Bang! The bullet directly pierced through the target ring and hit the bull's eye. This was the first shot. Bang! The second shot followed. He was lying in that position with his shoulder pressed against the long spear. No matter where the target was or what position it changed, he would be able to hit the bull's eye. 10 points. 10 points. 10 points. The ring-counting member shouted until the end. His voice was trembling, and there was a sense of worship in his hoarse voice. All 10 points, full points. It was also 5 shots in a row. However, Bai Jun's 5 shots in a row were even faster than Aju's. Moreover, the tip of the spear was constantly adjusting its direction. This was because there were 2 targets that were moving back and forth. Even so, his movements were smooth from the beginning to the end. It was so beautiful that it could not be described with words. At that moment, other than the voice of the ring-counting member, almost everyone held their breaths. Bai Jun stood up from the ground with a long spear in one hand. His military uniform fluttered in the north wind, and his pale thin lips curved slightly. So many teachers and students could only think of one sentence. With a sweep of the spear, no one dares to come within 100 meters of our battle zone. It was not as simple as just being handsome. That kind of action seemed to be able to ignite the blood in her body. Proud and proud, he couldn't stop his heart from trembling. So these are the soldiers of our Huaxia. Unyielding and unyielding heroic spirit. Whoosh. There was no one to lead the applause. It was all spontaneous applause from the students. Bai Jun stood there with a long spear in his hand. His eyes were clear and handsome. Those eyes that were as deep as the sea, and that familiar scene instantly turned on the switch in Li Yanfeng's memory. 2 years ago there was a rescue mission at the border. Just when he thought there was no way to save the hostages, a bullet fell from the sky and blew up the heads of 2 criminals in a row, giving them enough time to act. That kind of tricky angle was not something that any sniper could do. At that time, the only places around them that could be ambushed were trees. Moreover, in order to prevent them from having a sniper, the criminals used the hostages they were leaning against to block in front of them. They could not shoot at him at all. However, the person who fired the gun used the rebound angle of the wall to pierce through the criminal's temples. The most admirable thing was that he had been standing on the tree for more than an hour, but no one had discovered him. Whether it was the criminals or their army. If it wasn't for this shot, Li Yanfeng's people wouldn't have known that such a special force had come down. Each of them was very fast. They wore huge black masks on their faces. Their figures flashed past and directly barged in to solve the problem. Here. That person only said 2 words to him. It was when the hostages were pushed into his hands. Li Yanfeng couldn't see that person's appearance clearly, but he knew that that person was very young. He couldn't imagine how young he was at all. Only that person's gaze and shooting action remained in his mind. It was exactly the same as the instructor in front of him now. But how was that possible? Would he appear here? Li Yanfeng shook his head. Could it be that he was thinking too much? That person's identity was originally different from that of an ordinary soldier. He came from a famous family, a warlord family. Would he disguise himself as an ordinary soldier to give military training to the universities? Not to mention him, even their chief wouldn't believe it when he heard this news. However, his eyes and the way he held the gun were so similar. The students on this side were in an uproar. It wasn't just because Bai Juan's performance was so cool that it was a little shocking. There were also those wild soldiers that they had always thought came from nowhere. Every one of them's movements and shooting were ridiculously beautiful. Compared to Bai Juan's outstanding performance, they were more orderly. They fired almost at the same time and aimed at the same time. Even if they didn't score 10 points, they were all as high as 9. 8 points. The most important thing was that their speed was also very fast. There was no doubt that they were kings. After they were done shooting, just the way they held their guns made people feel a sense of coolness in their faces. There were 5 people in a row behind Bai Juan. Each of them had long legs and wide shoulders. Their figures were so good that they didn't look like them. They were also young and handsome. The visual impact they gave people could be imagined. The army could no longer win. With such a result, even the most powerful soldier in their army couldn't hit 5-10 points, and that was when the bullseye was moving. Vice Captain Zhang bragged for a long time. When he finally hit the 5th target, he had just crossed the 7-point line. This was the difference. The obvious difference was right in front of his eyes. Vice Captain Zhang only felt that he had been slapped in the face in public. He gripped the long gun in his hand tightly, and the anger in his chest rushed straight to his head. My hand slipped on the last shot and something happened. Captain Li, I request a one-on-one. I want to fight with Bai Juan. Such words could be said to be shameless. Chapter 1281. Li Yanfeng did not hear Vice Captain Zhang's words clearly. His ears were buzzing and he was still immersed in that unbelievable shock. At this moment there was only one thought in his mind. Was the person in front of him the Blade King that countless people worshipped? Commander. Vice Captain Zhang was still gnashing his teeth. Li Yanfeng did not come back to his senses. Bai Juan, on the other hand, raised his eyes casually at this moment. His tone was also indifferent. You mean you want to fight with me? That's right. Vice Captain Zhang turned his head and said aggressively, there are too many unstable factors in shooting. A real man is to fight with his fists and feet. Bai Juan glanced at him again and only said 2 words, I'm not fighting. Huh. Vice Captain Zhang laughed mockingly. Why not? Are you afraid? So that's all you have? Bai Juan lowered his eyes and tidied up his sleeves. He said slowly, because you're too weak. His words did not have the slightest bit of emotion, but it made all the students of the archaeology department burst into laughter. Vice Captain Zhang's face was so red that it was almost dripping blood. As he spoke, he clenched his hands tightly and said angrily, Captain Bai, aren't you afraid of blowing your own trumpet? We'll know who's weak after a fight. A fight is fine. Bai Juan seemed to have thought of something and suddenly curled his thin lips. Bai Liju, step out. When a Jew heard her name, her ears twitched. She took a big step forward and looked at Vice Captain Zhang with her eyes. She looked like a snoring little tiger that had smelled the smell of food. Her big round eyes were shining. Bai Juan smiled and made the final decision. Let my student play with you. You. Vice Captain Zhang was so angry that his face was distorted. What do you mean by this? Don't think that just because our army is well-mannered, we will be easily humiliated by you wild soldiers. Sending students out, are you mocking our army? Bai Juan sneered. Are you worthy of being in the army? So you're targeting me personally. Vice Captain Zhang was also an expert at distorting the truth. You sent your students out to make me retreat, right? You're really shameless. When Aju heard this, her eyes narrowed and she directly stood in front of Bai Juan. She did not waste her breath with the other party. She exerted force with her left hand and directly grabbed Zhang's arm. Then she exerted force again. Before Vice Captain Zhang could react, he heard a loud bang. His entire body was flung over a meter away by the force of the impact. His back slammed heavily into the wall and blood gushed out from his throat. In that instant, the surrounding air seemed to have solidified. Aju's roommates widened their eyes and looked at her. Their jaws were about to drop. The students from the other faculties all gasped in shock. Vice Captain Zhang was sprawled on the ground. His internal organs were in unbearable pain, but the anger on his face lessened. He still wanted to stand up and continue. However, he heard voices coming from the side of his ears. What a terrible fall. He was dealt with in one move. How could such a person be an instructor? It's really funny. However, an ordinary girl wouldn't be able to carry such a big man, right? Strength isn't the main point. The main point is that her movements just now were too cool. Haha, that instructor from the performing arts department should be more honest now. Even the students are better than him. What else does he want? That's why people from the performing arts department only know how to brag. The students are like this and the instructors are also like this. If you're willing to bet, you should accept your loss, but you still insist on asking for a rebuff. Isn't that Lu Zitong the same? Just now she was still not convinced that Aju won. Now look at Aju's skills. This last sentence not only made Vice Captain Zhang so embarrassed that he couldn't fight back, but it also directly stabbed Lu Zitong's spine. When she saw Bai Juan shoot, she was also shocked by that scene. The young girl's hazy good impression of him instantly turned into a strong liking. Although she knew that their department would lose because of this, she wasn't depressed. Her eyes had been on Bai Juan from the beginning to the end and had never left him. But it was different when Bai Lijiu made a move. This was simply a humiliation to her. Professor Liang. Lu Zitong seemed to be unable to hold it in any longer. She said passionately, "You are not allowed to disobey the instructor. This is the rule that you set up from the moment we entered the school." Now, Bai Lijiu openly made a move against the instructor without anyone's permission. This is already considered a violation of the school rules. We admit that we lost the competition. After all, there are many irresistible factors. However, we can't condone Bai Lijiu's actions. We hope that Professor Liang can reward and punish him. Such a student doesn't deserve to stay in University A at all. The last sentence was simply too much, to the point that it was a little too much. However, Professor Liang couldn't say it directly. After all, the person sitting on his left was Li Yanfeng and the person sitting on his right was President Lu. With these two people around, he couldn't criticize Lu Zitong in public. Moreover, the action had to be a fact. However, Professor Liang wouldn't punish a student just because of Lu Zitong's identity. Instead, he turned to Li Yanfeng and said, "What do you think of this matter, Commander Li?" Li Yanfeng's eyes had been looking at Bai Juan the whole time, but he hadn't spoken yet. The person on the other side laughed softly. "Miss Lu, what right do you have to say that someone doesn't deserve to stay in University A?" It was Bai Juan. His gaze was very cold, like ice in the 12th lunar month. His words were bone-chilling. "Is University A yours?" That gaze was too ruthless, as if it carried a strong smell of blood. It made Lu Zitong's hands and feet freeze. If I remember correctly, Aju is a special talent that University especially poached from abroad." After saying this, he raised his head and looked up. "Professor Liang, has University A changed its surname to Lu or Li? Why are you in such a dilemma?" When Professor Liang heard the word special talent, his heart skipped a beat, and his palms involuntarily began to sweat. "Please don't let it be what he thought. Professor Liang," Bai Juan continued, "perhaps you are too old and have forgotten. You should ask the Xiao family in detail who allowed Aju to appear here." As soon as the words Xiao family came out, Professor Liang immediately thought of another aristocratic family. The sweat in his palms became more and more intense. That one of the founding fathers of the nation. Wait a minute. Bai Juan. Professor Liang's legs suddenly went soft. You are. Bai Juan didn't look at him anymore. Instead he placed his gaze on Li Yanfeng. His voice was as cold as ice. Commander Li, are you here to inspect the effect of the military training or to support your niece? Are you going to interfere in this matter? Tell me again, whose military status does he want to revoke? Bai Juan's. No matter how protective she was, the female department head would not fight with her subordinates for her son. It was mainly because of Bai Juan. Bai Juan's military achievements were higher than hers. In a few days she would have to salute him when she saw him. Moreover, he was such a good child. Her heart ached when she saw the injuries on his body. If Bai Juan wasn't around, her son might have become a scourge that made people worry. It was because of Bai Juan that he stepped onto the right path and even won a lot of glory for China. In the past 2 years he had become more and more responsible. Who was Bai Juan? Was he the one who wanted to revoke his military status? Give him the phone. The female department head was really angry. When Li Yanfeng heard this, his face was as pale as a sheet of white paper. Q-Boy took a step forward. With a long gun on his left shoulder, he wanted to throw the phone to her. Some people in the army who already had opinions about them still wanted to stop them. Li Yanfeng shouted in a hoarse voice, "All of you get out of the way. Let this young master come over." At this point he could almost confirm who the person on the other end of the phone was. These people who did not have military ranks did not know. As the commander of the army, he naturally knew who Q-Boy was. This should be the youngest son that their department head doted on the most. Q-Boy did not go over. He threw the phone away and returned to Bai Juan's side in a standard military posture. Li Yanfeng's fingers trembled as he raised the phone to his ear. The person on the other end said in a deep voice, "Li Yanfeng, bring your disobedient soldiers back now. Revoke your military status? Do you know who Bai Juan is? How dare you revoke his military status?" Flap. The crisp sound of the call ending was like a sudden slap to Li Yanfeng's face. Li Yanfeng's lips turned white. He stood there with his phone in his right hand. His expression was blank. He felt that he was done for this time. As soon as the department head said, "Do you know who he is?" he knew that what he was most worried about had happened. That person was really the one in the sharp blade. The one and only soldier king in the entire army. Li Yanfeng raised his head and looked at Bai Juan with shaking eyes. His legs were weak. Bai Juan knew that the other party had already recognized him. His eyes were as calm as ink. "Hai Lu, take out your military badge." He was preparing to officially reveal his identity. They could not say their number. But old Zhao could still use it. At this time the problem soldiers were all very fast. They took out their military badges from the left opening of their military uniforms and put them on one after another. Bai Juan's eyes were as usual, but his voice was so loud that it could ignite people. Chapter 1283. But what did Bai Juan say just now? He said that he was the head of the amphibious army? The head of the amphibious army, in other words. In just an instant, Vice Commander Zhang's originally unconvinced face completely lost its arrogance. His face turned pale white. Not only him but even the other army soldiers were all stunned on the spot. Clang. The gun in his hand fell heavily to the ground. They never would have thought that the wild army that they had always mocked would actually come from the amphibious army. What was even more unexpected was Bai Juan's identity. Li Yanfeng was the first person to react, but his reaction was not because of the amphibious army, but because he knew more than these soldiers, the top secret information that could not be said. "Young Master Bai." Li Yanfeng wanted to explain, but when he met Bai Juan's gaze, it was as if he was frozen. Most of the students did not know what had happened, but there was a small portion of them whose families were also connected to the army. When they heard Bai Juan's words, their blood immediately boiled. Amphibious army. Heavens! I'm not dreaming, right? I can actually see people from the amphibious army in my lifetime. This time it was really worth it to go to university. Wait a minute, is the amphibious army very awesome? Of course they're awesome. I'll explain it to you like this. Look at the army, they're only awesome on land. The Air Force is good at aerial warfare, but what about the amphibious army? That's a comprehensive battle. They know how to fight, tank, missile, and even taxi. Moreover, they have to be outstanding in all three aspects. Some even know how to input information. In other words, they can be used as hackers at critical moments to hack into the local combat information database. Don't you think they're awesome? This is a hidden army that only the military knows about. Fuck, why do I feel like I'm watching a movie? I also feel that it's unbelievable. I heard from my father that the amphibious army doesn't come out of the mountains easily. Why would they come to our University A for military training? This is simply a pie falling from the sky. No wonder Instructor Bai and the others have been unwilling to talk about their own troops. They're so awesome. They must be afraid that we will be proud if they tell us. But some people don't think that way. They insist on treating others low profile as incompetence. This time Instructor Zhang should be dumbfounded. He keeps mocking Instructor Bai and the others because he is an official army soldier. That student Lu from the Performing Arts Department is also a weirdo. He doesn't want to admit his loss. He wants to go back on his words just because he has Uncle's support. The people of the amphibious force are not people that any random guild leader can control. This time it's a slap in the face, it's really loud. Hearing this, all the soldiers of the army blushed. However, none of them could say a word. Especially those who had mocked Bai Juan, they were even more embarrassed. Lu Zitong, who was at the side, didn't know what the concept of the amphibious force was at first. After hearing the explanation, her heart started to tremble. This time she was very likely to implicate Uncle Li. No, we can't just bide our time like this. If she didn't come up with a solution soon, Uncle Li's position would be gone. Instructor Bai. Lu Zitong had a pitiful look on her face. Her eyes were slightly red. Everyone subconsciously wants to protect their loved ones. I believe that you soldiers know this feeling the best. Ever since Uncle Li entered the school, he has never given me any special privileges, nor has he had any intention of supporting me. Instructor Bai is from the archaeology department. I can understand why Instructor Bai has made such a decision now, but military status is too important for a soldier. In order to protect a Jew, Bai Juan did not care about the consequences at all and pulled out his gun in the military compound. Now he was still doing it to protect. However, the range of protection was wider. While removing the malignant tumor, he was already strong enough to bear any consequences. This was the Bai Juan who had grown up. He was full of righteousness and was fearless. Chapter 1284. All the students in the school were watching this scene, and their blood was boiling with indescribable passion. Not only the girls but even the boys could not resist the aura that Bai Juan brought out at that moment. Although Vice Commander Zhang was a soldier, he was as timid as a mouse. He had never had a gun pointed at his head before. Now that he was facing the black muzzle of the gun, his expression changed. He was afraid that Bai Juan would really shoot. His legs began to tremble and he was so scared that he almost knelt on the ground. With such a miserable appearance, there was no need for anyone to say anything. The students had already made a judgment in their hearts. Just as Instructor Bai had said, Zhang was not worthy of being a soldier at all. When the army saw him like that, they also felt embarrassed. Especially those few army soldiers who were standing tall and straight. They turned their heads away and did not want to look at him at all. Lu Zitong's original plan instantly vanished into thin air. Her head was buzzing. She clearly saw the disgust in the eyes of her classmates. Lu Zitong was anxious and subconsciously called Li Yanfeng, Uncle Li. She did not expect Li Yanfeng to interrupt her fiercely. Don't say any more. Lu Zitong was shocked by that voice. Li Yanfeng was not even in the mood to pay attention to her. He turned his head and said to Bai Juan, I am willing to accept all of young Master Bai's decisions. Lu Zitong was shocked again when she heard that. Vice Commander Zhang could not hold on any longer. His knees went soft and he knelt on the ground. He had never been so embarrassed before. The students from the performance department did not have the face to raise their heads again. After this shooting competition, Vice Commander Zhang left. The trending topic that Lu Zitong had painstakingly bought was not used. Instead, it was Bai Juan who said to Li Hailu at the last moment, "Let the Xiao family investigate what happened to University A this year. How did some unnecessary students get in?" Lu Zitong's history was dug up in an instant. If her grades were not good enough, she would definitely be kicked out of school. How could Lu Zitong be convinced? She still wanted her father to torment her. Li Hailu did not hide it. He smiled at Lu Zitong and said, "It's fine if you don't admit it after doing something wrong, but you even set your sights on a Jew and want the professor to expel her. By doing this, it's obvious that you want Master Bai to kill you. You won't have any feelings for someone who bullies a Jew. Of course, you can continue to play those little tricks of yours after you leave the school. Don't blame me for not warning you. If you continue to play, your Lu family will be uprooted. Your father is also beside you. In this regard, you can consult your father more. Ask him, is the Lu family comparable to the Bai family?" At this time, Lu Xiangan had already realized which Bai family Li Hailu was talking about. A layer of sweat instantly overflowed from his forehead. He finally understood why his old friend would listen to the other party's orders so obediently. He also understood why Professor Liang was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Not to mention the Bai family, they could not afford to offend the Xiao family. However, Lu Zitong did not understand. She tugged at Lu Xiangan's sleeve and was about to make a fuss. "Dad, I can't just be driven out like this. Help me find some connections. Our family knows so many people. Uncle Li can't do it, but there's still Uncle Zhang and the others. There has to be one more powerful than this instructor Bai." There was a crisp slap. Lu Xiangan was afraid that Lu Zitong would say something else and completely anger the other party. He slapped her in the face. When had Lu Zitong ever been slapped like this? And it was in front of all the students. She covered her face and was almost dumbfounded. Lu Xiangan roared in a low voice, "Do you know who the other party is? Why are you yelling about looking for someone? Is this how I usually teach you? Go and apologize to young Master Li and young Master Bai for what you just said." Lu Zitong was yelled at by her father. Only then did she realize that the other party's identity might have already exceeded her imagination. She quickly turned her head to look at Bai Juan. With tears in her eyes, she wanted to speak. However, Bai Juan did not even look at her. He walked back to the archaeology department. All the teachers and students in the school were watching from the side. Lu Zitong was really in an extremely sorry state. Lu Xiangan saw that Bai Juan did not want to pay attention to them, so he did not dare to say anything. He quickly pulled his daughter out of the school. From then on, the father and daughter never dared to step into University 8. At the same time, the students also realized that their instructors did not seem to have simple identities. Just when they thought that after this matter was over, the school would definitely change a batch of instructors for them, but they did not expect that Bai Juan and the others were still there. This made the enthusiasm of the young men and women for military training even higher. Seeing Bai Juan was like seeing a Prince Charming on TV. The archaeology department was undoubtedly the happiest. Every student was smiling like a flower. "Aju, hurry up and tell me. What's your brother Bai's height in 3 measurements? There are people on the internet who want it. I think we should get Instructor Bai to sign an autograph for each of us. The righteousness of our Prince Charming must be preserved forever." "That's a good idea. Wait a minute, what's going on? Someone on the forum is asking about Instructor Bai's family background. They even asked if he has a boyfriend now." Seeing this, the people from the archaeology department collectively looked at Aju, who was chewing on a steamed bun in her mouth. Their gossipy souls suddenly burned. "Aju, tell me a little. What kind of girl does my Prince Charming like? There are many people who want this information now. The topic on the forum is especially hot." Aju's round tiger eyes rolled around. Then she thought for a moment. What kind of girl did little brother like? "Those who are strong, easy to raise and have white skin." Just as she said that, she stretched out her hand and pointed. That direction. Astonishment was pointing at her little nose. Everyone in the archaeology department laughed out loud. "Aju, are you referring to yourself? All right, we know that no one will not like our cute pet, let alone your brother Bai. But to be honest, what kind of girl does Instructor Bai like? I don't think he has ever specially looked at anyone. How about we leave this mission to Aju to find out?" The entire class unanimously decided to let Aju be the spy. who asked her to have a good relationship with Instructor Bai. Only the few roommates who knew the inside story looked at each other and almost spat out the rice in their mouths. You let the white steamed bun that Instructor Bai wanted to eat the most ask what Instructor Bai liked to eat. This was completely a trap for Aju. White steamed bun was the new nickname given to Aju by the roommates. When they heard that the little sister was going to risk her life for the sake of the majority of students, they all patted Aju's head. You can do it. You have to make good use of your strength. But even if you don't make use of your strength, it's fine. After all, Instructor Bai is so handsome. Aju. Chapter 1285. On the same day, Aju returned to the apartment with a mission. When she pushed open the door, she smelled the aroma of rice as if something was being stir-fried. Alaska was squatting there, wagging its tail, trying its best to act cute toward the owner in the kitchen. Bai Juan did not change into his military uniform. He stood there tall and straight, flipping the pot in his hand. When he heard the sound of the door opening, he raised his eyes and smiled at Aju. Only then did Aju see clearly that it was her favorite water spinach. Her tiger eyes were immediately fixed on it, and she stood there in a daze, waiting for Bai Juan to feed her. Bai Juan seemed to have seen the little monk from when he was young again. His eyes were full of smiles, but he was afraid that he would burn Aju, so he used his chopsticks to pick up a piece of water spinach and blew on it before feeding it to Aju. After eating her favorite food, Aju was so happy that her ears pricked up. She was really a canine. It was not an exaggeration to call her a little tiger. Bai Juan also liked to raise such a little tiger. Just seeing it made people feel good. Although Aju was a foodie, she was not idle. Knowing that the dishes were about to be served, she took a plate and a bowl and even poured milk for Bai Juan. When Bai Juan came out with the last dish, he saw that the dishes were placed very well and the rice was scooped into the bowl. That kind of warmth was just waiting for him. When the milk entered the stomach, it was warm. For 3 days in a row, Bai Juan was dealing with the trivial matters after his identity was exposed, so he did not return to the apartment. After returning today, he saw that the room was filled with Aju's things. He could not help but laugh, and he did something that he would never do normally, which was to show off. After the photo was sent to the WeChat circle, Li Hailu was the first to comment, "I really didn't expect you to be like this, Master Bai. Are you trying to let the whole world know?" Following that was the envy, jealousy, and hatred of the problem legions. Finally, there was Shaolin's message, "Tell Aju that I miss her." Bai Juan narrowed his eyes, moved his finger and chose to delete this message. Shaolin was speechless. "You're really... How can Aju stand you?" Bai Juan replied calmly, "She is drinking soup beside me now." Shaolin was speechless. Master Bai was really inhuman when he showed off his love. It was not convenient to say more in the comments. Shaolin gave him a call. Bai Juan looked at the screen and suddenly smiled. He directly handed the phone to Aju. "It's Shaolin. I'm too dirty. I'm going to run the bath water first. You guys can chat." Aju did not suspect anything and immediately took it. In order to reward her, Bai Juan specially fed her an apple. Although Aju did not know why her little brother wanted to reward her, she instinctively felt that it was a reward. "Hey." When Shaolin heard the voice of a young girl on the other end, he thought that he had heard wrongly. He confirmed the number again and then thought of Bai Juan's WeChat message just now. He quickly smiled. "Aju. It's me. Brother Shaolin, how have you been recently?" After Aju heard that familiar laughter, she became even happier. "I miss you so much." The two of them chatted on the phone. In the end, Shaolin realized that something was wrong. "Aju, where's your little brother?" With Master Bai's jealousy, it was impossible for him to let Aju talk to him on the phone for so long, right? "He went to run the bath water." This sentence revealed too much information. Shaolin, who had been an experienced driver since he was young, looked at the dark sky outside and thought about the current relationship between Bai Juan and Aju. As Bai Juan wished, he coughed heavily and said, "Since you guys are busy, then that's all for now. When you have time another day, let's get together. Brother Shaolin will bring you to eat delicious food." After saying that, Shaolin hung up the phone. Aju was still a little confused. Bai Juan saw the opportunity and walked over. He chuckled. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Brother Shaolin told us to get busy first." Aju frowned in confusion. "But I didn't say that I was busy." "So strange. Bai Juan took the phone from her hand and easily found an excuse for Xiao Lin. He's probably busy. Of course, he would not tell Aju what Xiao Lin was thinking. Be good, go take a shower first. Bai Juan pushed Aju into the bathroom. Aju was smart. As soon as she was drenched, she realized why Xiao Lin said that. What she said just now was too ambiguous. Could it be that Brother Xiao Lin thought that she and Bai Juan had done something bad? Thinking of this, the little tiger who had always been a good boyfriend could not help but blush a little. So much so that after taking a shower when she lay on her bed, the heat had not subsided yet. Seriously speaking, this was the first time she had spent the night in the same room as Bai Juan since she left the Bai family. Phew, she would try her best not to violate her sexual guard anyway. Fortunately, Bai Juan still had a guest room here. Otherwise, if they slept in the same bed, her resistance would definitely be greatly reduced. Thinking of this, Aju reached out and covered her face with the quilt. However, her heart could not be controlled. It was beating wildly and even the pulse on her body was a little fast. It was not like her usual self at all. The blood flowing in her veins had also become sticky as if it was oozing sugar. However, even if she wrapped herself up completely, she could not hide some inexplicable feelings. It seemed that the mission could only be completed tomorrow. In any case, she could not see Bai Juan's face that could cause people to commit crimes anymore. However, when she finally calmed down a little, the door was opened from the outside. She did not need to think to know who it was. Other than her, there was only, I wanted to drink just now, but who knew that the wine bottle would fall? The bed and blanket over there were wet, so I could only come over to sleep. Aju, do you mind sharing half of the bed with Bai Juan? Bai Juan's upper body was naked, and he was holding a pillow in his left hand. His eyes were as deep as the deep sea. When he met Aju's gaze, the corners of his mouth seemed to be smiling. Normally Aju would not mind. But now she was afraid that a rabbit like her would pounce on Bai Juan. She was still thinking of a reason to refuse. However, it was obvious that Bai Juan did not intend to hear a negative answer. After asking, he walked to the bedside, placed the pillow there and lay down as well. That man's breath that was difficult to ignore assaulted her face, making her feel defenseless. Aju's tiger eyes widened. She did not know why, but her hands and feet felt a little hot and soft. Especially when Bai Juan lay down and spoke, that warmth swept past her ears bit by bit. That feeling was even more obvious. It was soft and numb. Chapter 1286. What are you thinking about? Bai Juan turned his handsome face to the side and asked the person beside him. That pair of eyes was a little too beautiful in the night. The distance was too close, so close that Aju could touch his bare chest with just a move of her fingers. It was really a strange feeling. He was completely different from when he was young. He was so firm, full of tension and well-defined muscles. All of these meant that the little brother had already become a man. Aju was like a tiger growling in her throat. Seeing that she did not speak, Bai Juan raised his eyebrows. He stretched out his slender fingers and moved the corner of the blanket in front of her away. His voice was very pleasant. How many times have I told you not to cover your face with the blanket when you sleep? It's not good for your respiratory tract. Without the cover of the blanket, Aju only felt that every part of her cells was being invaded by that aura, and her heartbeat was also in chaos. However, those good-looking thin lips and chin were swaying in front of her eyes. She really wanted to be kissed just like that. But he could not be so reckless. She had to restrain herself. Aju told herself domineeringly that she could not bully the little brother just because she was strong. Bai Juan glanced at her and saw her clenching her hands. He knew that she would already feel uncomfortable because of his proximity. His eyes darkened. It seemed that 3 years was indeed a distance. Why aren't you saying anything? Bai Juan looked at the person beside him with a smile. The wine had already been poured, so of course it would not be wasted. He and Aju did not need to sleep in 2 rooms. Aju also wanted to say something so that she could divert her attention from the little brother's abs. But what should she say? Write her mission. Little brother, there's a question. My classmate wants me to ask you, Aju said mysteriously. This made Bai Juan curious. What question? What kind of girl do you like? As soon as Aju said this, she saw that her little brother's gaze had changed. It was as if he was a little cold. He just looked at her like that and the corners of his mouth curled up. Aju, under normal circumstances, I don't like you to ask such questions on behalf of others. Bai Juan reached out and pinched Aju's chin. It seemed to mean that she should not ask again in the future. Otherwise he might be unhappy. Was this a rejection? Aju said blankly, actually I'm not asking on behalf of others. I also want to know. Hearing this, Bai Juan suddenly laughed. His waistline on the side carried a seductive undulation in the night. If Aju wants to know, then she definitely has to say it. First of all, she has to be strong. He was right. Aju's eyes lit up. She immediately raised her fingers and began to count. 1. Bai Juan raised his eyebrows. What does 1 mean? Don't worry about it, little brother. Just continue speaking. He looked more serious than ever. Bai Juan looked at her and his smile became even wider. There was a heavy doting look in his eyes. Your skin is very white. 2. Aju looked very happy. One could see the happiness in her dull tiger eyes. Is there anything else? Also, the template was right in front of him, so it was not difficult for Bai Juan to think about it. He recalled a little. Their brains are slow, so it's easier to raise them. Aju subconsciously retorted, I'm not stupid. Bai Juan suddenly paused and lifted her chin with his finger. His eyes sparkled. You know, I knew it before. Aju frowned worriedly and said, I just don't know if little brother has changed now. I'm not stupid. But when they ask me what kind of girl you like, I'm referring to me. Bai Juan's heart trembled when he heard Aju's words. His voice and thin lips both lowered. It's never changed. But Aju, do you like the same as me? In just an instant, the air in Aju's chest seemed to have been sucked out. Little brother's lips, which made people want to kiss him, were very close to her. They were so close that even her breath could hit his lips. However, he did not kiss her. It was such a close distance that made people feel hot all over. Aju wanted to withdraw, but her chin was fixed by him. He was so domineering. He was not like his usual self at all. Be good, tell little brother, do you like the same as me? That kind of posture was extremely seductive. Every word he said and the breath he exhaled brushed against her lips bit by bit. There was some tingling and numbness that made people's hearts tighten. Aju gripped the quilt in her palm. For some reason her breath also softened. It should be the same. Before she could finish her sentence, Bai Juan's lips fell. At the beginning he did not kiss her very deeply. Instead he held her lips and kissed them bit by bit. Aju still wanted to push him away. Then Bai Juan used his strength and hugged her waist and pressed down heavily. Aju's entire body was numb. Her mind was blank and she could only passively follow Bai Juan. At that moment Bai Juan's true form was revealed. It was probably because he had yearned for it for too long. After removing the gentle shell, it was a strong possessiveness. Aju always had a way to make him go crazy. As early as when he was enlightened, she was an existence that made him unable to resist. Many nights he hid the most survival thoughts in the bathroom. He wanted to hug her, invade her, and make her completely belong to him. He wanted her so much that his body hurt. But he didn't dare to tell her. He was so worried that she would discover his secret. Now he finally didn't have to worry anymore. His Aju was his from the beginning to the end. Sensing that Bai Juan's strength had increased, Aju's fist involuntarily stretched out. With a swoosh. Fortunately it was Bai Juan. If it were anyone else they would definitely be punched out. Bai Juan tilted his head and pressed her down with his hand. For some reason, a thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. It was as if even the black hair in front of him was wet. He looked down at Aju from above. Both of their breaths were very chaotic and they could not control the sweetness of it. Aju also saw her fist. She was stunned for a moment before she explained gloomily, if I said that it was just a conditioned reflex, would you believe me? Yes. Bai Juan bent down and kissed her lips. He pressed her wrist with one hand and said in a deep voice, but you almost hit me just now, so you have to tell me, what's your next conditioned reflex action? Aju thought for a moment and decided to tell her little brother honestly, I'll probably lift you up and throw you under the bed. Bai Juan was speechless. Some information and short stories will be published on the public account. Zenki Show. Chapter 1287. Seeing that what she said was true, Bai Juan really couldn't hold it in anymore. He lowered his eyes and pressed it against Aju's forehead. He let out a long sigh. You didn't have this habit in the past. Why do you have it now? Big brother and second brother trained me. It's like a psychological cue. They said that if anyone dares to approach me in the future, I will throw them out of bed. Aju's small brows also furrowed. Big brother also said that this way, it can prevent me from violating the precepts of lust. Moreover, at that time he also emphasized that I should be wary of Bai Juan. Hearing this, Bai Juan completely understood that his two extremely smart brothers-in-law were originally targeting him. If it were anyone else, Aju would have already started beating them up. To be honest, if Aju really made a move, even he did not have the confidence to suppress her strength. However, Master Bai's greatest advantage was that he was not shocked by honor or disgrace. Even if he already knew that this special training was targeted at him, he could still treat it as if this matter was not targeted at him. He was very calm. Your big brother asked you to be wary of other people with the surname Bai. Am I someone else? Aju shook her head. She felt that something was wrong. However, Bai Juan's overly handsome face was too close to her. His legs, which were wearing military pants, rubbed against her little by little. Aju could not even concentrate on her thoughts, let alone consider whether it was right or not. Bai Juan reached out and wrapped his arms around her waist. He kissed her ear from the side. Could it be that in Aju's heart I am still someone else? No. Aju trembled. Her hand involuntarily hugged Bai Juan's arm. She wanted to maintain her voice, but her face was red and her tailbone was numb. Even her words were intermittent. Seeing this, Bai Juan's fingers forcefully tore open the buttons of her pajamas. Then one kiss after another followed. It was so densely packed that it made one's entire body burn. His back was very good-looking. Even in the dark night, Aju could feel the strength of Zhang Yang. It had a very stimulating effect. He kissed her neck gently and even his breath was hot. Aju had never experienced this before. She could only grab Bai Juan's arm like that. Her lips were about to break from biting. Bai Juan's heart ached when he saw this. He gently kissed her lips. His fingers covered the softness that he had dreamed of. Little brother. Aju couldn't take it anymore. She reached out and hugged Bai Juan's neck. Bai Juan's kiss slowed down. The voice that was attached to her ear was bewitching. Is it comfortable? Aju could not say anything. She felt as if her entire body had turned into water. The delicate skin was at his fingertips. The smooth touch was more than 10 times better than what he had imagined. The color in Bai Juan's eyes grew darker and darker. It was so dark that just when Aju thought that he would take her at all costs. However, he suddenly stopped kissing her collarbone, burying his head in her neck. Aju's face was already red and her tongue was dry. Her face was at a loss after the joy. Undoubtedly, on this day the little brother gave her a lot of happiness. A joy that belonged to a young girl. However, she did not understand. Why did he stop? Was little brother asking her to retaliate against him? However, Bai Juan didn't think so. After a while he seemed to smile and reached out to touch her head. Alright, go to sleep. I'll go next door to see if there are any other quilts. After saying that, he really stood up. Aju lay on the bed, looking at the ceiling with her 2 round tiger eyes. Woof woof woof. He didn't even give her a chance to retaliate? Why? After Bai Juan left the bedroom, his first reaction was not to get a quilt. Instead, he strode into another bathroom and turned on the shower without thinking. He did not care how cold the water was and started to flush himself. That part of his military pants was already a little swollen. He almost doubted whether he would be able to control himself if this continued. After all, that feeling was too wonderful. She was in his arms, her face red as he rubbed her. Damn it. A certain part of his body did not have any intention of disappearing. Instead, because of his recollection, it grew bigger. Bai Juan lowered his eyes. His black hair with water droplets fell down, but it could not hide his fierce eyes. He stretched out his right hand, followed by waves of deep panting. Aju lay on the bed, her body still emitting an unusual residual heat. She tossed and turned again. She did not know if this counted as breaking her sexual abstinence. Aju sat down cross-legged. Her long black hair was spread on the bed, but her heart was still a little tight. She thought about it carefully. She did not reject anything that her little brother did to her. She also liked to be with her little brother. Since he still liked her now, did that mean that she could become his wife in the future? He was not sure. She would settle this matter first. Although this was a little unfair to Buddha Wooly, Buddha was loved by so many people. Her little brother had always been alone since he was young. She could not let go of her little brother. After thinking this through, Aju immediately became energetic. Her round eyes were very bright. Baijun came back after taking a cold shower and saw this scene. He had been gone for less than an hour. After such a long time, he thought that Aju had already fallen asleep. He did not expect to see a little wild cat. "Why aren't you sleeping?" This time Baijun did not sleep directly beside Aju like last time. Instead he took another thin blanket to avoid skin-to-skin contact. He was afraid that he would not be able to hold it in. Aju smiled. That kind of eyebrows always made people feel that it was suffocating. Baijun was once again glad that he was able to return to Aju's side when he was supposed to. Otherwise, with such a face, it was inevitable that some blind people would come over. He hated anyone who had thoughts about Aju. "I'm waiting for you, little brother." As Aju said this, she tilted her head. "Just now you said that you still like me, right?" Baijun looked at her seriously, looking for him to confirm. He could not help but laugh. He even could not help but kiss her cheek. "Yes, I will only like you for the rest of my life." It was undeniable that when she heard the word "for the rest of her life," Aju's heart was really sweet. However, she had not forgotten the business that she needed to settle. "Since you like me and I like you too, then you should marry me tomorrow." It is a modern sweet novel. The female and male protagonists are both very handsome. I hope to see a familiar beauty appear. Today I will discuss with Gui Gui and the others to see what kind of new book activity we will do. That soft long hair rubbed against his cheek from time to time, and a faint fragrance seeped into his nose. The delicate body in his arms was also soft and warm. Hugging her was like hugging a small stove. To be more precise, it was a little sun. She had always been his sunshine. From the moment she wore a monk's robe and held a meat bun in her mouth, looking at him adorably and calling him little brother, he knew that he would no longer be the only person in his world. Anyone who had been saved by the sunshine would not want to fall into the darkness again. He was the same. Therefore he had to keep her by his side no matter what methods he had to use. The next day, Aju was carried out of bed by Baijun. Her eyes were still asleep. She reached out and rubbed them. She did not know where her little brother got a car from. It was a military Hummer. The license plate was very easy to remember. There was a red logo in front of it. Aju was bent over and placed in the passenger seat by Baijun. She looked left and right before she finally became energetic. When she thought about it, she remembered that she had proposed to him last night. "Little brother, are we going to the Civil Affairs Bureau now?" Aju asked. "Isn't it a little too early? It's all foggy outside." In the northern sky, the air would become bad as soon as autumn arrived. If one went out too early, they would usually see a thin layer of haze. The temperature was not like summer, which made one's whole body sticky. Instead, when the morning wind blew, there was a cold feeling. Even the uncle who swept the floor had not come out yet. The Civil Affairs Bureau should not be open yet, right? Aju was indeed right. However, she could not withstand Baijun's sometimes black-bellied overbearingness. "Don't worry, someone will handle the procedures for us." As he said that, Baijun took out his phone and made a call. On the other end, the director of a certain bureau was still sleeping soundly. One had to know that at their age it was really not easy to sleep well, right? He had to prevent the tigress at home from checking on him, and he also had to drink and drink outside. If he did not have some psychological quality, he would not be able to do this job at all. Therefore, the director of a certain bureau was very persistent about sleeping. He had specially instructed his subordinates not to call him in the morning if there was nothing important. But on this day, for some reason, the phone on the bedside kept ringing non-stop. The director of a certain bureau flipped it over and over. When he saw that it was a number without a name, he thought that it was his subordinate, so he was immediately angry. "How many times have I told you? Don't call me in the morning. Which branch are you from? You don't even know this little rule. Tell me your name, I have to." "Baijun." Master Bai's thin lips opened slightly, and he said two words in a faint voice. The director of a certain bureau on the other side shuddered and almost threw the phone in his hand out. He must be having a nightmare. Yes, he must be having a nightmare. He had been out of the army for so many years, how could he still hear this name? Let him calm down first. Calm down, the nightmare will wake up. The director of a certain bureau did not believe that this call was real, so he pinched his thigh hard. It actually hurt. This was not scientific. Chapter 1289. Was it not a dream? Viper Viper. The director of a certain bureau said the code name that he did not want to mention until now. Bai Juan smiled. It seems that you haven't forgotten me, Weasel. Don't call me Weasel. The director of a certain bureau immediately flew into a rage. Back then his code name was so mighty and domineering, Yellow Emperor. However, he met a youth in the special forces. That youth was none other than their captain at that time, Viper Bai Juan. He was a soldier who was outstanding in all aspects, but he actually let a youth be the captain. At that time he was quite unconvinced, so he tried to provoke him. Who would like to have a captain who was so younger than them, right? Who would have thought that as soon as he made a move he would be knocked down by someone? Moreover, he was even given a code name that made him want to jump into the river. Weasel. No, Captain, can we discuss this? Look at how younger you are than me. At my age I can already be your uncle. Can you not mention my dark history? It had been 2 years. The director's wife rarely saw her husband, who was already starting to have a small belly, talk to anyone in such a nice tone. After all, he came from the army and always had an arrogant air about him. Even her father had never been like this. The director's wife was inexplicably curious about who was talking to him on the phone. Who is it? She propped herself up and asked. Director Huang immediately took the phone to the other side and said very seriously, a former comrade. Comrade? The director's wife smiled. I've seen all of your comrades. Why does this sound so young? He has called him Captain. Director Huang immediately said, you heard wrong. Be good and continue to sleep. I'll go to the toilet to make a call. The director's wife was speechless. Be good. One had to know that her husband had never used such a word to her before. Usually he looked like a proper person. Now she looked at her husband's back as he hurried into the bathroom. For some reason she smiled. After knowing him for so many years, she still didn't know that he had such a side to him. How should she put it? It was a little cute. Director Huang sat on the toilet like a weasel. He was afraid that his wife would hear something and even locked the door. Bai Juan asked slowly from the other side, was that sister-in-law? Why don't you let me say something? I'll let you say a few words and we'll divorce. Director Huang retorted internally, but he didn't dare to say it out loud. Instead, he seemed to have realized something. How did you know my current contact number? He had clearly blacklisted all the people who should have been blacklisted, and even used a cancellation account to avoid this evildoer. Why was the other party so persistent? Bai Juan laughed. As he stretched out his hand to wipe the corner of Aju's mouth, he casually replied, Weasel, if I were you I wouldn't ask such a stupid question. Director Huang. Will you die if you don't have a sharp tongue? Then why did you call me? It couldn't be to disturb his sleep, right? What time is it? Don't reptiles need to rest? Bai Juan retracted his hand and handed the soy milk and plain bag that he had bought very early to Aju. Then he focused his attention on the phone again. It's nothing. It's just that I'm going to get married, so I'm going to get involved with you. This was the first time he had seen someone use their connections so confidently. Weasel. Oh no, Director Huang was just about to scold the other party when his throat suddenly choked. You tell me, what are you going to do? He couldn't be blamed for stuttering. That person who had never even looked at women, even when the recruits in the army were watching movies, he would eat and read with an indifferent expression, was actually going to get married. He had always thought that he liked men. Was that not the case? Well, he had to confirm it again. Well, is the person you want to marry a man or a woman? It was not impossible for a man. Otherwise, why would he use his connections? He could just go directly to the bureau chief to get the marriage certificate. He believed that as long as he showed a man's face, there would be a large number of women who would clamor to marry him without him mentioning his identity. Was there a need to use his connections? And he even called early in the morning? This was not normal at all. After hearing Director Huang's words, Bai Juan raised his eyebrows dangerously. Before he could answer, a Jew who was sitting beside him swallowed the bun in her mouth and said seriously to the other side, "I'm a woman, not a man." Director Huang was stunned. He thought that there was something wrong with his ears. Needless to say, this voice was really pleasant to hear. "Captain Bai, I really didn't expect that you would really find yourself a girlfriend. Was the world a fantasy?" Bai Juan smiled and said, "Weasel, if you ask unrealistic questions again, I might bring them to your house one day." Director Huang knew who he was referring to. That group of problem soldiers were all from the Red Meow Party. They were really good at tearing apart people's karma. This was simply a threat, a blatant threat. Director Huang gritted his teeth so hard that they hurt. "I won't ask anymore, but does the old chief know about your marriage?" Bai Juan was the only grandson of the Bai family. If he really got married, the Bai family should have sent him an invitation long ago. Not to mention sending an invitation the last time he bumped into the old man. The old man even said that his grandson was waiting for someone. He was still far from having a girlfriend. How could he get married just like that? "After the procedures are done, I will tell grandfather." Bai Juan was very calm. After saying this, he added in a low voice, "Right now only you, me and my lover know about this matter. If a third person receives any news, you should understand my methods." Hearing this, Director Huang immediately dispelled the thought of informing the old chief in his heart. I won't tell anyone." Bai Juan smiled faintly and said, "Director Huang is still smart." It was not easy for him to change from Weasel to Director Huang. Director Huang himself said that he was even more terrified. One had to know that if there was nothing important for him to do, Bai Juan would not call him Director Huang. "Captain Bai, what exactly do you want me to do? If you stick your head out, you'll be stabbed. If you don't, you'll be stabbed as well." Bai Juan started the car with one hand and put on a black military earpiece in his left ear. "Nothing. I just want to go to your place to get a certificate." "That's easy," Director Huang said very straightforwardly. "When the bureau opens at 9 o'clock, I will immediately call someone to get it done for Captain Bai." Bai Juan's slightly cold voice sounded again. It was low and deep, as if this was the first time in his life that he revealed his emotions in front of an outsider. "I can't wait until 9 o'clock. In less than 30 minutes, they arrived at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. The guard at the door was a local old man. The old man was still puzzled. What was going on today? Why did all of them come so early? Bai Juan nodded politely at him and held Aju's hand as they walked into the hall. Then they went straight to the second floor, the director's office. When the door was pushed open, Director Huang was drinking tea. When he saw the person Bai Juan brought, he almost spat out all the tea. She. Is she an adult? This was what Director Huang wanted to ask the most. But he knew that he couldn't be so direct when talking to Bai Juan. "Ha, Captain Bai, your lover is quite young." Director Huang put down the cup and wiped his glasses with a handkerchief. How could Bai Juan not understand the meaning behind that? He held Aju's hand and sat down. His voice was indifferent. "In this room, other than you, everyone is young." Director Huang was speechless. Damn it, how could he be so sharp-tongued? But he was indeed nearly 20 years older than the other party. He couldn't live anymore. "This is my ID card and 1-inch photo of her." Bai Juan pushed the things over. His slender fingers took Director Huang's purple sand teapot and poured a glass of water for Aju. Then he continued, "First, get all the information. Then ask if we are willing to spend the rest of our lives with each other." "Director Huang, are you the director or am I the director? You are a Special Forces soldier in the army. Do you have to be so clear about the process of the Civil Affairs Bureau? You usually have nothing to do but blindly study it yourself." This. Director Huang wiped his sweat and couldn't refuse directly. "Well, Captain Bai, you know that your identity is special. If you want to get married, you have to get the approval document from the higher-ups. Only then can I let you follow the rules." When Bai Juan heard this, he took out another document from his handmade handbag. Director Huang looked at the content and date on it and was in a bad mood. You applied to get married the year you joined the army?" "Yes." Bai Juan answered Director Huang's words casually. He did not forget to turn around and tidy up Aju's long hair. Director Huang looked at this scene in disbelief. No one had ever made Bai Juan act like this before. It was as if he could smooth out all the sharpness on his body and only make people feel that slight itch. Had Bai Juan changed? No, he was still the poisonous snake that ate people without spitting out the bones in the past. But when facing this girl, even his eyes were unbelievably docile. There was almost no trace of fierceness in them. Did he tame a wolf into a dog? For some reason, Director Huang suddenly remembered what young Master Tang had said before. At that time he was still wearing a well-ironed military uniform and stood in this position. His eyes were looking out of the window as he held a cigarette between his fingers. You should know that the two of you are not of legal age yet. Bai Juan raised the corners of his eyes and smiled. Of course I know. Otherwise why would I look for you, the director? Captain Bai, you can't cheat your own people like this. You know, right? The two young masters of Juwei Corporation, the big one is popular all over the world and the small one controls the economy. Which one of these two people isn't a sister Khan? Even ahem. Director Huang lowered his voice and said to Bai Juan, even this girl's hidden information states that no one with the surname Bai can get close to her. Master Bai, tell me honestly, did they already know that you want to marry her sister? Bai Juan did not deny it. They also have people in the army. My application information is right there, so of course they will see it. Is it really good for you to be so self-righteous? The key is that if I agree to it, what if the two young masters find out later? Bai Juan naturally knew his worries. Don't worry, if anything happens they will look for me first. They won't implicate you. Director Huang looked at those deep eyes. Perhaps it was because the memories just now had touched him too much, so he gritted his teeth. Wasn't it just a marriage certificate? Special circumstances required special treatment. Even if he was really implicated, as long as these two children were willing, he would accept it. Moreover, there was still the Tang family protecting him. Thinking of this, Director Huang sat up straight again and met Aju's incomparably clear eyes. They were quite curious, as if they were asking a director why he was whispering. Ahem. Director Huang coughed and straightened his attitude. He asked Aju, Bai Ligio, are you willing to marry Bai Juan? You weren't abducted or threatened. When Aju heard such words, she instinctively frowned. She did not forget to defend Bai Juan at all. Uncle Director, little brother has never threatened me. Moreover, I was the one who proposed to him. I don't have time to buy a wedding ring yet. After I get the marriage certificate from you later, I will bring little brother to buy a wedding ring. Aju said it openly, but Director Huang's jaw almost dropped when he heard it. He had guessed the ending of the story, but he did not guess the beginning. She was the one who proposed this marriage. Wasn't it a little upside down? Captain Bai, aren't you the one who proposed? Director Huang looked at Bai Juan with disdain. You have the nerve to ask a girl to buy a wedding ring for you. When Bai Juan heard this, his smile became even wider. Why should I be embarrassed? After we get the marriage certificate, she will be my wife. Why should I be embarrassed with my wife? Director Huang was speechless. Had no one ever said that you were very thick-skinned? Then let me ask you now. Bai Juan, do you really want to marry Bai Ligio? This time Bai Juan did not use any half-smile tone. In the end, when he saw the child lying in his arms and not saying anything, he could not help but touch her cheek. When we get back, you can return it to me. Yes. Aju liked the feeling that she did not say anything, and the little brother knew what she was thinking. The counter clerk was at the side and handed over the black card that Bai Juan had swiped with both hands. After Bai Juan took the card, President Song immediately made way for them. When the rest of the people saw that Bai Juan had left, they started to ask at once, President Song, who was that? Why does he look so extraordinary? He even dares to not give you face. President Song loosened his tie. The young master of the Bai family, what face does he need to give me? Bai family? Which Bai family? President Song replied, which Bai family is there here? You're saying that he's the mysterious Bai clan. That's right. When you see him in the future, you have to avoid him. No one can afford to offend this person. Those people weren't thinking about hiding or not. They were thinking about networking. I really didn't expect young Master Bai to be so young and so good-looking. I've heard people say before that he was still in school at that time. He was already an influential figure in the courtyard. But didn't they say that he went to join the army? Is he back? Why is he married? That's right. He's actually married. Is this for real? President Song was amused when he heard this. Alright, I know what you guys are thinking. You girls can save it. What young Master Bai said is false. You guys saw young Master Bai's attitude towards that girl just now. He protected her the entire time and didn't even let us take a look. Can be seen how good he is to people. At this point, President Song turned his head and asked his subordinates, did they come to choose the ring themselves? Were there no soldiers following behind them? The salesperson didn't expect their CEO to speak to a small employee like her. She immediately shook her head. It's just the two of them. It seems that the young lady brought the gentleman here and said that she wanted to buy a ring for the gentleman. At first they thought that the gentleman was being kept. They didn't expect that his background was so big that even the CEO had to be respectful to him. Moreover, there was that black card just now. It was a limited issue. Not everyone could get it. Only the super VIP users of a certain bank who had a certain amount of influence in the world and had a distinguished identity could get such a black card. Who would have thought that such a man's wedding ring was actually bought by a woman? The few presidents were also shocked when they heard the salesperson's words. Asking a woman to buy a wedding ring. However, a Jew felt that it was nothing. The jade she was wearing was enough to buy a lot of wedding rings to play with at home. These were all given to her by Baizhuan. Now it was her turn to use a pair of wedding rings to trap her little brother. No matter how she thought about it, she was the one who had profited. Baizhuan saw that she was smiling in his arms. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "What are you so happy about?" "Of course I'm happy to take advantage of you." Aju was happy. Her little appearance was also very cute. Baizhuan smiled faintly. "If you like to take advantage of me so much, why didn't you agree to express your feelings to President Song just now?" Chapter 1292. That won't do. Aju's face was serious. "It's already hard enough for you to guard the border. As your wife, I can't drag you down. If I accept other people's things, what if they rely on you? Little brother's righteousness can't be tarnished just like that." Baizhuan was stunned. He never thought that this would be the answer. He thought that she just wanted to buy a ring for him. He did not know how to describe that feeling. He had picked up a gun to protect others for too long. He had actually forgotten the feeling of being protected. His Aju had never changed. Baizhuan chuckled and said, "I really don't want to get too close to them." "Yes, I can see that." Aju's eyes were wide open. She looked dull, but she was actually very smart. Baizhuan rubbed her head and led her over. The corners of his mouth were all smiles. It seemed that Aju was more suitable to be his wife than he had imagined. His girl had grown up. In fact, Aju had always been very good at reading these things. When Baizhuan walked forward, she did not forget to lean over and whisper in her little brother's ear, that President Song just now had a cunning face and cloudy eyes. He should be very fond of beautiful women. Lust is a knife above a knife. Sooner or later something will happen to him. So little brother, you must not learn from these people, understand? I am enough for you. Baizhuan was very serious when he first listened. When he heard the last sentence, he could not help but turn around and laugh. You're enough, isn't it? Aju was a little conflicted. She thought about her own advantages. I know how to box, I can protect you, and I can also read people's faces. I'm quite versatile. Baizhuan pulled her over and added for her with a smile, "Why don't you say that you are very good looking? You have to be humble." Aju had a pair of round tiger eyes. She was very serious. Baizhuan now wanted to have a sofa where he could carry her up and put her on his lap. Why was she so cute? Little brother, don't smile all the time. Aju pursed her lips. Just as Baizhuan was about to speak, a reporter brought the microphone over. "Closer. May I ask if you are boyfriend and girlfriend? We have some questions here about the degree of tacit understanding between couples. We want to ask you. A few couples have been interviewed just now. Are you willing to accept?" Baizhuan's eyes swept over. It was simple equipment and there were a few passers-by around. It was indeed an ordinary investigation. He smiled and said, "Of course." "Wow. That's great. I was just thinking that sir and this lady are a good match. It would be great if I could interview you." The reporter was very good at talking and she was also very pretty. She held a microphone in one hand and a piece of paper in the other. Here's the problem. Please listen carefully. If you answered wrongly you would be punished. Then may I ask, when was the last time you kissed? Please answer at the same time. A Jew paused and her black gem eyes were stunned. Why did he ask such a question? Shouldn't she be asking him what his favorite food was? He had been tricked. A Jew thought for a moment and tried to answer correctly. However, she didn't know why, but whenever she thought of the image of her little brother kissing her, her heart couldn't take it anymore. Even her face was a little hot. She couldn't think of anything no matter how hard she tried. The reporter was probably anxious from waiting. He asked, "Do you have an answer?" The couples who had just been interviewed also wanted to hear the answers of these two people. After all, they were too good-looking. Beautiful things always made people stop and admire them. A Jew was obviously anxious, but the more anxious she was, the more confused her mind became. At this time Baijun chuckled softly. He rubbed her head with his big palm and lowered his eyes to kiss her. Then he pressed the stunned Jew into his arms and faced the camera. He only said 2 words, "Just now I saw you." In an instant, a Jew's face turned red. She leaned against Baijun's chest, revealing only her 2 erect strands of hair. The reporters on the street were stunned for a moment. When they reacted, their eyes were filled with envy. There were also the girls who were watching. They looked at Baijun and then at their boyfriends. They couldn't help but let out a long sigh. After all, no girl would not be willing to be treated like that by her boyfriend. Such an answer were really too sweet. The boys immediately understood what his girlfriend meant. They looked at Baijun with resentment in their eyes. Bro, it was one thing for you to be handsome, but why were you so good at making your girlfriend happy? Can't you give the others a chance to live, huh? Baijun, on the other hand, was very calm. Are there any other questions? No. The reporter shook her head and only then did she come back to her senses. She glanced at the script. She had already thought of which scene to use for today's publicity. This pair was not only pleasing to the eye but also very topical. How could it be so sweet? Unfortunately, the reporter did not know that just as she was still imagining how to make the theme, Baijun raised his hand as he brushed past her, and the recorded scene was blurred. After all, he was a special forces soldier, so of course he would often carry some high-end electronic equipment. He could not appear on TV and he could not let any video fall outside. If he was alone it would be fine. But once a Jew was here, this scene could not exist. Sister Zhang, take a look. Why does this camera seem to have a problem? What's wrong? Can't we film it? No, it's just that there seems to be a video missing. The video that was missing was the video that the reporter wanted to use the most as a topic. How could this be? It was really like seeing a ghost. The reporter had been lowering her head and fiddling with the camera. When she raised her head and wanted to let the eye-catching couple record again, there was no one on the street. At this moment, a Jew and Baijun were sitting in the Hummer. Baijun lifted her chin and continued the kiss just now. It was indeed sweet. On the tip of her tongue and lips, every part of her body was like eating a clear mint candy. When it bloomed in her mouth, her entire body was numb. A Jew could clearly sense that this was the smell of her little brother for a long time. It smelled very good, so good that it could make people addicted. Especially when he bit her lower lip, a Jew could not help but tremble. Even her eyes became wet. Baijun lowered his eyes to look at the person in his arms. He took a deep breath and tightened his grip on the steering wheel. But after that he did not do anything. Instead he hugged a Jew and bit her little shoulder. We still have training in the afternoon. Chapter 1293. However, there was one more thing. A Jew raised her head and said, "Little brother, I'm getting married just like that. Shouldn't you tell my parents?" However, the answer was somewhat unexpected. "I talked to my mother-in-law on the phone last night." Baijun turned the steering wheel and turned his head to look at a Jew. "She has already agreed." A Jew's round tiger eyes were stunned for a moment before she said, "Since she has agreed, then I won't make the call." Baijun stopped and rubbed her head. A Jew realized that her little brother especially liked to touch her head, so she moved closer and let Baijun touch her head. Baijun really found it a little difficult to control himself. He always wanted to kiss her and hug her. He was clearly still driving. When did he become so unprincipled? However, he had never had any principles in front of her. Bai Juan was not lying. He had indeed spoken to Hellion Vivian on the phone last night. No matter how much he wanted to abduct his Aju, he had to go through the other party's parents. This was the least he could do. And it was because of this phone call. Hellion Vivian smiled. Have you ever thought about what if I don't agree? Yes, Bai Juan replied. But I have to make this call. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows, and the smile on the corner of her mouth became even wider. Bai Juan, I really didn't misjudge you. I'll leave Aju to you. But you know my two brats. If they find out that you abducted Aju, you'll suffer. Bai Juan naturally knew how difficult it was to deal with his two brothers-in-law. Including marrying Aju, he had to agree to Hellion Vivian's conditions. He did not tell Aju anything. Her girl only needed to be happy to be his bride. She did not need to worry about anything else. Bai Juan was also very clear that it was better to keep the matter of him marrying Aju a secret. But he was even more clear that his Aju wanted to share the joy with others. You can call Grandpa. Bai Juan handed the phone to her. Aju did not take it. Instead she smiled and took out her phone. I have Grandpa Bai's phone number. Use mine to call him. Okay. When Aju was on the phone, the hair on her head was still standing up. No matter how she looked at it, she looked cute. Old Master Bai, who had just finished a meeting, was immediately amused when he saw the incoming call. Aju, why did you call grandfather? Aju laughed at first and her voice was very bright and clear. Grandpa Bai, I'm married to little brother and I even got a certificate. I'm a member of the Bai family from now on. You, what did you say? Elder Bai suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. Get married? Get a marriage license? No. When did his grandson come back? Why didn't he know? When Aju heard Old Master Bai's roar, she was also stunned. Grandfather, are you not happy that I married little brother? How could this be? Old Master Bai immediately denied it and quickly organized his tone. Aju, Grandpa looks forward to the stars and the moon every day. I hope that the two of you can be together as soon as possible. Grandpa had long recognized you as his granddaughter-in-law. Grandpa didn't even let Bai Juan meet those people he had introduced to him. My grandson is Aju's, right? Aju was overjoyed when she heard that. It's also Grandpa's. Can you not sell me around like this? Bai Juan came over with a light smile and gave Aju a suggestion. Let him give you a gift. A granddaughter-in-law must have a gift. Old Master Bai had already heard his grandson's voice on the other end of the phone. Now that he was close, he could not help but ask, when did you come back? Is what Aju said true? Are you married? Have you registered your marriage? When he said the word registered, Old Master Bai's voice trembled. When did this brat register their marriage? Aju was still young, right? Could she register it? But on second thought, his grandson must have used some kind of method again. Old Master Bai was a tough person and had been a good soldier all his life. But at this moment he chose to turn a blind eye because he knew better than anyone how much his grandson had sacrificed in order to marry Aju. He had gone through a few cold bones and returned full of injuries. Even when he was taking out the bullets on the hospital bed, he was still chanting that person's name. It was time to give him some reward. This grandson of his had propped up the Bai family and protected the territory when other people should have been in love. Now he would let him do whatever he wanted. Forget it, Grandpa won't ask you anymore. You brat, there's no truth in your mouth. As Old Master Bai spoke, he added, Aju, when you have time, bring your little brother to visit Grandpa. Grandpa is in southern Tibet and no one dares to play chess with Grandpa. When Aju heard this, she immediately nodded. October is almost here. When the school has a break, I will fly over. Then what about your wedding banquet? When do you plan to hold it? The more Old Master Bai spoke, the happier he became. Why don't we hold it in these 2 days? If old Lizzie and the others know that my grandson has married a wife, they will definitely be envious. I will call them in a while. As for your Grandpa Shao, I want them to know that my Aju is still the most promising. She brought him home so early. Aju nodded even more vigorously this time. Bai Juan held his forehead when he heard this. Chief Bai, it seems that I am your biological grandson, right? Speaking of bringing her home, it should be him bringing her home, right? Go. Don't disturb my conversation with Aju. When old Master Bai met a Jew, he was like an old child who had returned to his childhood. Bai Juan could not do anything about them, but he still answered old Master Bai's question. A Jew is still in school. It will not be good for her to hold a wedding like this. The army will not allow soldiers to fall in love with students. Although we are legal, the wedding will wait until a Jew is an adult. Old Master Bai was so smart, how could he not understand what his grandson meant? These things were originally small matters. It was just that his grandson did not want a Jew to suffer a little. After all, getting married while underage would always attract criticism. Aren't you afraid that a Jew will meet a better man in university? Old Master Bai could not help but tease his grandson. University A is a place where talents gather. If I'm not wrong, you will only be back for a few days. You are about to return to the army, right? If you don't announce it, are you really not worried? How could he not be worried? The more he liked her, the more uneasy he would feel. These were the secrets hidden in the deepest part of Bai Juan's heart. Even if they got married, they would have to face how far they would go and what would happen in between. He could not predict it either. However, there was only one thing he was sure of. That was that he would never let go. Even if this certificate was obtained in a hurry, he still had to hold it firmly in his hand. Chapter 1294. But before he could say anything, a Jew opened her mouth and said to the other side of the phone, "Grandpa, don't talk nonsense. What can little brother be worried about? I like little brother so much because I was afraid that he would run away, so I proposed to him." Old Master Bai was stunned when he heard this. Then he laughed out loud. "You be good. Your little brother won't be able to run away in this lifetime." "Yes, I know. Military marriages are protected by the law. You can't get a divorce casually." A Jew held Bai Juan's hand and said very seriously, "From now on, little brother will be mine." Although listening to a Jew's confession was a very beautiful thing, Bai Juan also knew that if he continued to talk, the old man would laugh endlessly. He decisively took the phone from a Jew's hand and hung up the phone. Bai Juan knew very well what his grandfather was like. He reckoned that he had already started to call those grandpas in the courtyard to show off what happened today. Really? Bai Juan smiled and shook his head. A Jew did not understand what he was laughing at. She only decided that her stomach was very empty. She reached out and touched it. She raised her head and said, "Little brother, I'm hungry." "I know. I'll take you to a place to eat now," Bai Juan said as he patted her head. Her breath was warm and her face was handsome. It could be said that when he treated a Jew, Bai Juan had never been ungentle. The two of them went to a vegetarian restaurant. Usually restaurants like this were not cheap and good places, and the environment was also elegant. And the restaurant in front of them was one of the most famous deep alleys in the entire capital. Because it was quiet and secretive, it was deeply liked by the upper-class people and celebrities. This restaurant had been open for 3 years. It was said that the real boss had never appeared. Everyone only knew that he was a high-ranking disciple who came from the military compound, but no one knew who he was. However, there was one thing. No one dared to cause trouble here and no paparazzi followed them here. It was very simple. If anyone did anything here, they would pay the price the next day. Similarly, this restaurant was not like other vegetarian restaurants, which rejected ordinary people because of the good environment. The dishes in the restaurant were definitely worth the money. As long as you could find this restaurant, the chef would give you the best cooking skills. Even if you only ordered a bowl of Beijing zhajiang noodles, there was plenty of sauce. Fresh cucumber strips and shredded green onions were added into the noodles, and half a spoonful of oil was sprinkled on top. The piercing aroma of the noodles filled the air, and together with the shop's special grapefruit herbal tea, it was extremely delicious. Authentic taste, childhood memories, every bite made people want to give a thumbs up. According to their chef, the boss had instructed them to make the noodles well. Other than white rice, his girl's favorite food was fried sauce made with eggs, accompanied by a large bowl of noodles. When she was young, she could eat several large bowls at a time. Only then did people know that the owner of the restaurant opened the restaurant because of the girl he was talking about. There was only one word in the name of the restaurant: temple. Mahogany tiles were used as tiles. After Bai Juan brought a Jew in, a waiter in a cheongsam immediately came up to them with a smile. Sir, how many people are there? The two of you. Sir, this way please. The waiter arranged for them to sit by the window. From where Aju sat, she could see the flowers blooming outside and the green stone wall. The ancient charm was very pleasing. Aju inexplicably felt that this restaurant was very comfortable. The waiter looked at her and smiled. Miss, I don't know if you have a Geo in your name. If you do, tell me in advance. The shape of the lotus leaves was modified to make an umbrella for the herbal tea, so that it could retain the fragrance when it entered the mouth. Just such a beautiful plate presentation was enough to make one's appetite move. Bai Jun took the wooden chopsticks and first put balsamic vinegar in the zhajiang noodles. Then he scooped a spoonful of chili oil and poured it over. He mixed the noodles back and forth before handing it to Aju. Aju's face was small and the bowl was especially big. When she buried her head in eating, her entire small face seemed to be buried in it. The 2 strands of hair on her head were still standing up. It was not like what Bai Jun had said that she was like a cat. The more Aju ate, the brighter her tiger eyes became. It was like the taste of the noodles made by the little brother when she was taking the exam in the past. Chapter 1295. Bai Jun tilted his head and glanced at her. When he saw her white and tender teeth biting the noodles, he suddenly remembered that when Aju had just arrived at the Bai family, she was too young and still had a small head. When she ate a piece of vegetable, she had to bite it hard. She could always make the hearts of the group of people in the courtyard melt. Now she was still like this. Bai Jun laughed. He also picked up his wooden chopsticks and stuffed a big mouthful of noodles into his mouth. When he was with Aju, he would really eat more than usual. It was not a matter of a day or two for a child to eat. However, others did not think so. Especially the 2 women who had just been brought in by the waiter. They were wearing white coats outside and military uniforms inside. Captain Bai. The first woman to speak was very elegant. She seemed to have come out from a big family. Her skin was well maintained. When she looked at Bai Jun, her eyes were filled with unconcealable joy. This woman was none other than the female military doctor who had confessed to Bai Jun back then, He Chu Qiao. She did not expect to see Bai Jun here. Her face was slightly flushed. However, when her eyes swept over and landed on Aju, a trace of sadness quickly flashed across her eyes. Yi Xiaoxiao, who was following beside He Chu Qiao, knew what her good friend was thinking. She nudged her with her arm and said in a low voice, "That girl is younger than Captain Bai. It's very likely that she's a friend's sister or something. What are you thinking about here? If we don't confirm our relationship, we still have a chance." When He Chu Qiao heard her good friend's words, her face turned even redder. However, she really took a big step forward. "Captain Bai, what a coincidence. How's the injury on your back?" "Little brother, you have an injury on your back?" Aju was still eating her noodles. When she heard this question, she immediately raised her face. That stunning face of hers was better than He Chu Qiao and the others in minutes. Yi Xiaoxiao's heart also sank. Bai Jun did not have any intention of paying attention to He Chu Qiao. Instead, he used his fingertips to wipe the corner of Aju's lips. His smile was warm. "It was a long time ago. I want to have a checkup. I'll have a checkup when I get back." Aju was very serious in this aspect. However, Bai Jun laughed. He had other business. "Okay, I'll let you check my whole body." Aju was such a cute child. No matter how smart she was only thinking about the injuries on Bai Jun's body. How could she have thought that this sentence was a trap? She immediately nodded and agreed. However, it was this kind of interaction that made He Chu Qiao's heart ache more and more. No one knew that when she was his attending physician and wanted to help him, he would not let her touch his hospital gown. On the contrary, the soldiers under his command were not rejected by him. But now he actually treated a girl like this. There wasn't the slightest trace of coldness and unapproachable indifference from that time. Why did this happen? And he didn't seem to want to talk to her at all. He Chu Qiao's face was about to bleed from embarrassment. Yi Xiaoxiao, who was following behind her, had never been treated like this either. Everyone in the restaurant was looking at them. She and Chu Qiao were the flowers of the army. Wherever they went, they were envied by others. This Captain Bai was a soldier after all. No matter how noble his appearance was, It could not hide the impolite ruffian aura on his body. Just by seeing that he only ordered 2 big bowls of jajang noodles here it could be seen. She reached out and pulled He Chuqiao. She said with a fake smile, "Chuqiao, let's not disturb Captain Bai and his little girlfriend from eating jajang noodles." You with such good conditions, what kind of man can't you find? The more polite you are to some people, the more excited they will be. I've heard before that some ordinary office workers who know about this place always come to take a look. Although the other dishes are not expensive for outsiders like them, it's always painful to order them. Therefore this jajang noodles have become their first choice. I didn't know before, but now that I've seen Captain Bai's girlfriend, I finally understand this principle. Jajang noodles can fill your stomach, don't you think so? She didn't finish her sentence. There was a loud bang. The small bowl in Bai Juan's hand brushed past her ear and shattered heavily on the ground. Yi Xiaoxiao was so scared that her face turned pale at first, then she shouted, "Where do you think this is? The army? Even in the army, when is it your turn to be arrogant as the captain? We gave you face before because He Chuqiao had a good impression of you. Now you're taking advantage of us, aren't you?" In fact, whether it was Yi Xiaoxiao or He Chuqiao, they had only seen the injured Bai Juan back then. As medical staff, they would bandage the injured soldiers' wounds every day. However, they did not know Bai Juan's name, nor did they know why he was injured and what his identity was. This was a secret even to their minister, let alone them. Back then, He Chuqiao had asked a question or two because she wanted to chase after Bai Juan. However, those soldiers all laughed and said, it was an accident during training. Therefore Yi Xiaoxiao believed that Bai Juan had no background. After all, when he was injured, no one with a high military rank came over. How could Yi Xiaoxiao know that no one went because they had received Bai Juan's order? He did not want his grandfather to see him in such a sorry state. It was inevitable that the old man would be sad. He also did not want a Jew to know that his girl should not see this blood. At that time he thought that he would come back to life. He had to come back to life. Otherwise he would not be at ease no matter who he handed over to his Jew. The news had been sealed at the highest level, so how could anyone go to check on the injury? However, Yi Xiaoxiao took it for granted that Bai Juan had no background, so she dared to challenge him like this. Soon, the noise here attracted a large number of waiters. Yi Xiaoxiao pointed at Bai Juan and said to the waiters, "This person is causing trouble in the restaurant." He was also the one who broke the bowl. He didn't even inquire about what kind of place the temple was before coming to show off. When the waiters heard this, they stretched out their hands and said, "Sir, please leave this restaurant immediately or else." The chef, who had never come out before, actually hurriedly walked to Bai Juan's side and directly interrupted them. "All of you, shut up." The waiters paused. A smile appeared on the chef's face. "Young master, long time no see. When I heard the servants say that the eggs should be 90% cooked, I wondered if you were back." As expected, it's really you, young master. In an instant, not only did the smug expression on Yi Xiaoxiao's face freeze, but even the waiters beside her were extremely shocked. Chapter 1296. Bai Juan stood up with one hand in his pocket. He didn't even look at Yi Xiaoxiao and the others. He only said to the chef, "Old Chen, we haven't seen each other for more than 2 years, right? Ever since you handed this shop over to me, I've only seen you once in the year before last. After that, I've never seen you again." Old Chen treated Bai Juan very respectfully. "Young master, don't worry. Everything in this shop is done according to your instructions. There are no changes at all." Old Chen still remembered that 3 years ago, a youth in a school uniform found him in the Bai family's logistics army and said that he was going to be a soldier. He asked if he was willing to make a bowl of zhajiang mian with him. Unlike ordinary zhajiang mian, the zhajiang mian that the youth wanted to make was not made with meat. Instead, it was made with scrambled eggs and then boiled with sauce. Old Chen was an old chef. This was the first time he had seen someone make zhajiang mian like this. He instinctively blocked his hand and said, "Young master, this zhajiang mian is not made like this. This sauce must be made with meat to taste good." At that time, the youth only smiled and said to him, "My girl is a disciple who has returned to the secular world. She doesn't eat meat." Only then did old Chin know that there were some people who were willing to wash away their lead and make a bowl of zhajiangmian with eggs for the sake of the existence in their hearts. If it was a young master from another courtyard, old Chin might not even care about him. However, because of this young master's sincere efforts, old Chin also picked up the pot and studied with Bai Jun how to make an ordinary bowl of zhajiangmian unexpected. Finally they succeeded. Everyone who ate it was full of praise. At this time the youth proposed to open a private restaurant, and he would be the owner and chef. Old Chin was a boorish person, so he didn't know these things. In addition, he was already old, so he didn't immediately nod. Bai Jun smiled and said, "Old Chin, don't worry. Someone will do the other things." Old Chin finally agreed, but he thought again. Isn't young master going to be a soldier? Why is he still opening a restaurant? Old Chin still remembered that the sky had just turned dark, and there was still a streak of red in the western sky. The young man stood there with his back straight and said in a low voice, "It's because I'm leaving that I don't want her to go hungry. With this restaurant here, if she doesn't have money one day, she won't have to eat pancakes on the street. She looks dull, but she has a big appetite. She gets hungry easily. If there's not enough food, it won't be enough for her." So much effort. He just didn't want to starve his girl. Elder Chin had lived for most of his life, but this was the first time he had seen someone like this. Feeling moved, he immediately got to work. This was also the reason why, as long as a girl with Iggyo in her name entered the restaurant, everything would be free of charge. At this time, when old Chin looked at the young man again, he couldn't help but feel that time was peaceful. The young master was no longer the young master of the past. From his movements, one could see the strength of someone who had been to the border. However, the look in his eyes did not change. It was deep and full of righteousness. "Chef Chen, who is this?" the waiter at the side asked carefully. After all, Chef Chen's identity was not ordinary. Someone who could make him call him young master. Old Chen glanced at him and said, "This is the real boss of our restaurant, Bai Jun, young master Bai. Bai Jun." As soon as these two words were said, someone in the private room stuck out his head and looked out. The mystery about this vegetarian restaurant was finally solved. It turned out that the boss behind it was none other than the well-known young master Bai. Everyone who came out of the courtyard admired and worshipped Bai Jun. Even those young masters who ate, drank, and played all day long had to bow down when they saw him. How could they not bow down? A person's credit was earned by themselves. They did not use the slightest bit of family connections. It was completely different from those who took the family's money and earned it. Is it really that young master Bai? It looks like it. I heard from my father that his military rank is already a major. My father talks about other people's children in front of me all day long. Thinking about it carefully, this Bai Jun is even younger than me. Chief Xiao specifically named him as the successor. This is really incomparable. No wonder no one dares to cause trouble here. The main reason is that it's comfortable to stay here. Young Master Bai is not like us, who casually makes things difficult for anyone. You heard what that woman said just now. She was clearly making fun of the people that young Master Bai brought. This definitely can't be tolerated. She's not bad-looking, but her words carry the smell of money. This time she was probably dumbfounded. Yi Xiaoxiao was not just dumbfounded. Her entire face was pale. Bai Jun? Only then did she know what his real name was. Naturally, she also knew his family background. It was the young master that they did not even dare to compare to. At first, Yi Xiaoxiao thought that her status was higher than his, but now she realized what the gap was. "Captain Bai, why didn't you say earlier that you were?" Yi Xiaoxiao still wanted to say something. Bai Jun glanced over from the corner of his eyes and interrupted her coldly. "Old Chen, invite these two people out. In the future, our restaurant is forbidden from letting such people in." "Yes." Old Chen gestured to the waiters at the side. Yi Xiaoxiao and the other two felt as if they had been slapped in the face. Of course, they could not stay in this place anymore, but they had lost all their face. In the future, they might be laughed at in the circle. A Jew rolled her round tiger eyes and looked at this scene. Suddenly she said, "Little brother, are you also very popular in the army?" Bai Jun smiled and said, "I'm not sure either." "Liar." A Jew's mouth twitched. Such a big peach blossom. Bai Jun was still pretending. "But why didn't I see it?" "Little brother, you have to be honest." A Jew educated him seriously. Her big eyes turned around again and she said, But you also saw that those women still like the Bai family more than you. I'm different. I like you as a person. Think about it carefully, am I still the best? When old Shin heard such a theory, he could not help but laugh out loud. So this young lady had been fooling around for a long time just to praise her family. Aju turned her head and saw that the chef was laughing. She immediately felt embarrassed and lowered her head to burrow into Bai Jun's arms. Bai Jun reached out and hugged her as if he was hugging his own child. Of course, my Aju is the best. It had always been. There was only this one person. That was why she did not care about his background. She was only good to him because he was him. It was a celebrity who took a picture of his little brother after eating. His little brother was very cute. His eyelashes were long as he patted his little stomach. The celebrity's voice was very gentle. You're full. Come and see your brother. As expected, it was very similar. Aju poked her face. Bai Jun didn't know what she was thinking. There was still training in the afternoon. The car stopped at the school. There was another round of military training. During the break, the people in the class hurriedly pulled Aju to the side. Willie Aju, why did you only come to school now? The sisters have been waiting for you anxiously. Aju touched her head. I had something to do this morning. Oh, then did you ask the questions that the sisters asked you to ask? Everyone's eyes were filled with anticipation. Aju smiled brightly. Yes, I did. Then what kind of person does Instructor Bai like? Those people asked again. Aju pointed with her finger. Me. As soon as these words were said, it immediately attracted a wave of boos. Please, Wooly Aju, you already answered this answer last time. It seems that she didn't get the answer. Instructor Bai might not tell her. Poor child, I originally wanted to use her beauty to mislead Instructor Bai. Instructor Bai has known Aju for a longer time than we have. Perhaps he has long been immune to Aju's beauty. You're right. The group of people began to gather together and whisper. Only the few people in the dormitory pulled Aju over and brought her to the side. Did you really ask Instructor Bai yesterday? Aju nodded. Yes. What did Instructor Bai say? Aju replied, he said he likes me. What about you? What did he say? Aju tilted her head. I said I like little brother too. And then? This was the main point. According to Instructor Bai's personality, he would definitely pounce on her after confirming that the two of them had thought it through. They wanted to listen to the live broadcast. Verbal live broadcast. And then, oh, Aju said, feeling that she understood. And then we were together. Now we are boyfriend and girlfriend. Her roommate bumped her shoulder and said very seriously, Student Aju, with our unwavering dormitory friendship, you should tell us the truth. Don't beat around the bush with your sisters. Be good and tell us the truth. Tell us what? Aju blinked. Could it be that they already knew about her marriage with little brother? Her roommate said again, of course, tell us how you spent last night. I heard that soldiers are especially good at that. Was it because you were too tired yesterday that you didn't come this morning? We all know. When Aju heard this, she realized what they were talking about. Her white jade-like face turned red for a moment before she said, we didn't. No. Her roommates were stunned. Didn't you say that you moved out to live with Instructor Bai? You didn't even live together? Aju nodded. Then with a small face she said very seriously, actually, I also feel that it's time for me to pounce on little brother. Let's do it tonight. It's the wedding night. Her roommates were speechless. Wait a minute, they had no intention of letting Aju send herself into the tiger's mouth. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.